You're in danger. Stay with me." Adrian Moretti's hand closed around Lena's wrist before she could breathe. The three men by the door went completely still. Not because Adrian raised his voice, because he didn't have to. In 20 years, nobody had ever seen him reach for a woman he didn't know. That single gesture told every criminal in that diner one thing: she was untouchable now, and that terrified them more than any gun. If this is your first time here, please subscribe and follow Lena's story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The diner on Halsted Street smelled like burnt coffee and old grease at 11:45 on a Thursday night, and Lena Carter had exactly one thought in her head as she wiped down the last table of her shift. $12 more in tips, and she could cover the electricity bill. That was all she was thinking about. Not the rain hammering the window beside her. Not the two drunk men 2 booths down who kept asking her to refill their coffee, even though they both knew the pot was empty. Not the overdue notice from her landlord that she'd folded into a tight square and pushed to the bottom of her purse 3 days ago, because unfolding it again felt like admitting something she wasn't ready to admit. She was thinking about $12. She was thinking about keeping the lights on. Lena was 26 years old, and she had been keeping the lights on for herself since she was 19, since the night her mother finally lost her fight with the cancer that had been eating her slowly for 2 years, following her father, who had left 4 years before that. In a way, nobody in the family ever talked about directly. The way people in her neighborhood talked around death and absence and money trouble carefully sideways, with their eyes somewhere else. She had learned to be invisible because invisible people don't get asked questions they can't answer. She kept her head down. She did her work. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for things. She just moved through her life the way water moves through cracks, finding the small openings, fitting herself into the space available, surviving. The 2 drunk men finally left without asking for the check, and she cleared their table without anger, because anger cost energy she didn't have. Rosa the night cook called from the back. "Lena, you almost done?" "5 minutes, Lena called back. She was stacking the coffee cups when the door opened. The sound of rain came in first, then 3 men. Lena didn't look up immediately. She was reaching for a cup near the edge of the counter, and she registered them, the way she registered most late customers, as a wait, as an obligation, as something that would delay her getting home by however long it took them to decide what they wanted. But then she looked up, and something in her stomach pulled tight. They weren't sitting down. Most people who came into the diner this late were tired. They moved slowly. They looked at the menu board even when they already knew what they wanted, because looking at something familiar was a small comfort when the rest of the world felt too big and too cold. These 3 men were not tired. They were not looking at the menu board. They were looking at her. The tallest one, who had a scar running from the corner of his left eye down to his jaw, took 1 step forward and then stopped. His eyes moved over her face, the way you'd look at an address you were trying to match to a house number. Checking. Confirming. The man behind him pulled out his phone and looked at the screen and then back at her. The 3rd one moved to stand near the door. Lena's hand stopped moving. She had survived 19 years of adulthood in Chicago. She had walked home alone at 2 in the morning more times than she could count. She had learned to read rooms and crowds and situations because she had no one else to do it for her. She had developed a sense for danger, the way some people developed a sense for rain, before the clouds appeared, something that moved through the air and settled in her chest before her brain caught up to explain it. Her brain was catching up now. These men were not here for coffee. "Rosa?" she said, not loudly, but Rosa had already come to the pass-through window, and Lena could feel her standing there watching, not speaking. The tall man with the scar took another step. "Lena Carter," he said. It wasn't a question. Lena's grip tightened on the coffee cup. She didn't answer. She had learned somewhere from instinct more than experience that confirming your name to someone who already knows it is never a good idea. "We need you to come with us," the man said. His voice was flat, professional. The kind of voice that had said those words many times before and understood that the calmer it sounded, the more frightening it became. "It won't take long, just a conversation." "I'm working," Lena said. She was surprised by her own voice. It sounded steady. She didn't feel steady. "You're done working," the man said. He was almost at the counter now. The third man by the door hadn't moved, but she understood his position differently now. He wasn't waiting to come in. He was making sure she couldn't go out. She looked at the man closest to her, and she understood with a cold, dropping clarity that this was not a situation she could talk herself out of. She had nothing these men wanted. She was nobody. She had $12 in tips in the pocket of her apron and a landlord's notice at the bottom of her purse, and a studio apartment with a drafty window she'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. She was a waitress. She was invisible. She was the person everyone overlooked, and someone had sent 3 men to find her specifically. The front door opened. Not the way the 3 men had opened it with purpose and preparation. This door opened the way weather comes in inevitably, like something that was always going to happen, and there was no point in being surprised. The rain smell came in stronger, and a man in a black coat walked through the door. He was tall, but what you noticed first wasn't his height. What you noticed was the quality of stillness that moved with him the way a shadow moves with a body. He didn't look around the diner the way normal people looked around a new space, checking exits, assessing, orienting. He walked in like a man who already knew exactly where everything was and had decided it all met his standard. He was somewhere in his mid to late 30s, dark hair cut close, jaw set, eyes moving to Lena immediately, not scanning the room and finding her, moving to her directly as if there was nothing else in the room worth noting. The 3 men went still, not cautious, not calculating, still in the way animals go still when something larger appears. Lena had never seen that reaction before. She had lived in Chicago her whole life, and she had seen plenty of dangerous men and plenty of situations where dangerous men encountered other dangerous men. And what she had always seen was posturing was chest expanding. Was the ritual of 2 threats trying to establish which one was larger. These 3 men did not posture, they did not expand, they contracted. The man in the black coat crossed the diner toward Lena without acknowledging the 3 men in any visible way. He didn't look at them directly. He didn't address them. He moved to the counter where she was standing and stopped, and when he spoke his voice was quiet enough that only she could hear it clearly. "You're in danger. Stay with me." He said it the way you say something you've already thought through completely. The conclusion of an internal argument that was finished before he walked through the door. Lena stared at him. "I don't know you," she said. "That's correct," he said. "Then why would I stay with you?" He didn't answer that immediately. He looked at her for a moment in a way that felt different from how the men across the diner had looked at her. They had looked at her like an address on a piece of paper. This man looked at her like something he was trying to understand. "Because the men who just asked you to leave with them," he said quietly, "are not going to give you a choice, and I am." Lena looked at the 3 men. The tall one with the scar had not moved closer. He was watching the man in the black coat with an expression Lena did not have a word for. It was somewhere between wariness and calculation, the expression of a person trying to figure out how badly a situation had just changed without making any sudden movements. "Who are you?" Lena said. "Someone who knows what they want from you," the man said, "and someone who knows why you can't go with them." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." He reached into his coat pocket and set something on the counter in front of her. A photograph. She looked at it, and her hands went cold before her mind understood what she was seeing. Her father. Younger, much younger, maybe 30 years old, in a suit she had never seen him wear. Standing beside a man she didn't recognize, shaking hands. Both of them looking at the camera with the serious expressions of people who understood what the moment meant. The man he was shaking hands with was someone important. She could feel that even without knowing who it was. "Where did you get this?" she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "We can talk about that," he said somewhere that isn't here. Right now, I need you to make a decision." Lena looked at the photograph. She looked at the three men across the diner who had still not moved, but who were watching everything that was happening with the focused attention of people waiting for a signal. She looked at the man beside her. "What's your name?" she said. He looked at her. The quality of stillness in him was remarkable up close. Most people shifted, breathed visibly, adjusted their weight. He simply existed in the space he occupied completely. "Adrian," he said. "Adrian Moretti." Rosa made a sound from the pass-through window. A small sound, involuntary. Lena heard it but didn't look, because she was watching the three men across the diner, and what she saw when Adrian said his name confirmed everything she needed to know about which direction to choose. The tall one with the scar looked away. Not down. Away. The movement of a person who has just been reminded of something they would prefer not to think about. "All right," Lena said. She untied her apron. She folded it on the counter. She picked up her purse and her jacket from the hook beside the pass-through, and she turned to Adrian Moretti and said, "Whatever this is, I want answers. Real ones." "You'll get them," he said, and he turned toward the door. She followed him. Behind her she heard nothing from the three men. No footsteps, no voices. They let her walk out into the rain beside a man she didn't know, because the alternative, whatever the alternative would have cost them, was not worth attempting. That more than anything told her exactly how dangerous the man walking beside her really was. The car waiting outside was black and expensive in the quiet way that didn't announce itself. A man sat in the driver's seat. He didn't speak. Adrian opened the rear door for Lena, and she got in without letting herself hesitate, because she had already made the decision, and second-guessing it, while standing in the rain on Halsted Street, was not going to improve anything. Adrian got in beside her. The car moved. "Where are we going?" she said. "Somewhere safe." "Safe is relative," she said. "I'd like coordinates." He looked at her with something that might have been surprise on a different face. On his, it read more like recalibration, a small adjustment to an expectation. "North side," he said. "Private property. You won't be held there against your will. I want to make that clear immediately." "Make it clearer," she said. "Because three men just tried to force me to go somewhere with them, and now I'm in a car going somewhere with you. And the difference I'm currently aware of is that you asked." "That is the difference," he said. "That's a very small difference." "I understand that," he said. "I'm asking you to accept it temporarily." She looked out the window at the wet streets, the reflections of streetlights on the pavement, the city she had lived in her whole life sliding past outside the glass. "The photograph," she said. "My father. Who was he shaking hands with?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "The man in the photograph is someone powerful," he said. "And the handshake in that photograph represents something that person has spent 7 years trying to make sure no one ever sees." Lena turned from the window. "My father has been dead for 8 years." "I know," Adrian said. "Then why," she said carefully, "would anyone care now about a photograph of a dead man's handshake?" "Because the handshake wasn't just a gesture," Adrian said. "It was an agreement. And the terms of that agreement, if they ever became public, would destroy one of the most powerful people in this city." Lena was quiet for a moment. "What does that have to do with me?" Adrian turned to look at her directly. "Your father left more than a photograph," he said. "He left evidence. Hidden evidence. A complete record of everything he knew, everything he'd witnessed, everything that was done and by whom. He left it somewhere safe. He told no one where, not even your mother." "How do you know that?" "Because I've spent 4 years trying to find it," he said simply. "And I know he kept it from everyone he loved on purpose, to protect them. Because anyone who knew where it was would be in danger." Lena felt something cold move through her that had nothing to do with the rain still visible through the window. "He protected them by not telling them," she said slowly. "Yes." "But I'm in danger anyway." "Yes." She let that settle. "Because someone thinks I know," she said. "Because someone thinks you might lead them to it," he said. without knowing you're doing it. They've been watching you for months, Lena. The places you go, the things you keep, waiting for you to unknowingly visit whatever location your father chose. The car was quiet except for the sound of rain on the roof. You said you've been trying to find it for 4 years, she said. Yes. Why do you want it? His jaw shifted slightly. Because the man in that photograph is someone I trusted once, he said. And what he did to my organization, to people who worked for me, to people I was responsible for, is something I have not yet been able to prove. She studied his profile. So you want the evidence? I want justice, he said. And yes, the evidence is how you achieve that. And the 3 men in the diner work for the man in the photograph, he said. His name is Victor Kane, and he has spent the last year becoming increasingly certain that the way to find whatever your father left behind is through you. Lena looked out the window again. Her father. She had spent 8 years constructing a careful, manageable version of grief for a man who had been complicated and present and then gone, who had left when she was 15 and come back briefly once when she was 17, looking thin and apologetic, and then gone again permanently in a way no one fully explained. She had grieved him with one hand behind her back, the way you grieve someone who left before they died, and she had put that grief somewhere organized, where it couldn't interfere with her daily function. The photograph had shaken something in that organization. The young man in the suit, the serious expression, the handshake that apparently meant something large enough that 8 years after his death, people were sending 3 men to a diner in the rain to collect her. He never told me anything, she said, about any of this, about any part of his life outside our apartment. I know, Adrian said. He kept this completely separate from everything personal. It was deliberate. It was in the way he was able to make it an act of love. Lena said nothing. She wasn't ready to call it that yet. Tagged. The safe house was not what she had imagined, though she wasn't sure what she had imagined exactly. She had grown up watching enough crime movies with her mother on Sunday afternoons to have some picture of what a Mafia safe house looked like: concrete and bare and industrial, somewhere you went when you needed to disappear. This was a house in Lincoln Square. 3 stories. A tree in the front yard that was old enough to have its own history. Warm light visible through the curtains. She stepped inside. The hallway had photographs on one wall and books on a shelf at the end, and a coat rack by the door with a worn leather jacket already hanging on it. It looked like somewhere a person actually lived. There were 2 other people inside. A woman in her 60s, compact and efficient looking, who told Lena her name was Margaret and offered her tea in a tone that made it clear this was not a negotiation. A younger man near a laptop at the kitchen table who stood when Lena entered and said his name was Tom, and nodded and sat back down. Margaret put tea on the kitchen table. Lena sat down across from Adrian and wrapped both hands around the mug. I want everything, she said. All of it. You said I'd get real answers. Start. He looked at her. And he started. He told her about her father in pieces, and each piece landed differently. Thomas Carter had worked for 2 years as a low-level accountant inside the financial network that supported the Moretti organization. Not for Adrian, who had not been in his current position yet, but for the infrastructure around it, the layers of legitimate and semi-legitimate business that most large criminal enterprises depended on for stability. He had not known at first what he was actually accounting for. When he discovered it, he had a choice. He made 2 choices simultaneously, which was the kind of thing that either saved a person or destroyed them, depending entirely on how carefully they executed it. He kept working, and he kept records. He kept records of everything. Transactions, conversations, names, dates. Not about the Moretti organization specifically, about the man who was using the Moretti organization's financial architecture as a private channel for something entirely his own, something Adrian and everyone around him had not yet understood was happening. Victor Kane. Adrian's name for him was said with the particular flatness of a person who has spent years managing their own rage. Victor Kane had at the time Thomas Carter was keeping his records been Adrian's most trusted advisor. His mentor in the particular way that powerful men sometimes position themselves relative to younger powerful men, offering guidance that was also surveillance, offering access that was also debt. Victor had built much of the financial infrastructure himself, which meant he had also built in certain private channels that only he controlled. Thomas Carter had discovered what moved through those private channels. Lena listened. She listened to the description of what her father had witnessed, and she felt something complicated happen in the grief she had spent 8 years organizing. Because the man Adrian was describing was not the complicated, absent, apologetic father she had carried in her memory. He was someone who had seen something terrible and decided to document it at enormous personal risk, with no immediate plan for what to do with the documentation. He was someone who had kept working and kept keeping records for 2 years longer than was safe or reasonable, because he understood that the record he was building had value only if it was complete. He was someone who had then, when the pressure became impossible, when the surveillance closed in, and he understood his time was running out, hidden everything, and walked away, separating himself from his family as completely as possible, because contact was a vector for danger. "He left you," Adrian said carefully, "because staying was the most dangerous thing he could do." Lena's grip on the mug tightened. "I was 15, she said. "I know. My mother got sick a year later." "I know that too," he said. "And I'm not going to tell you the leaving was right. I'm telling you what the reason was. Those are different things." She looked at him. "How long have you known about me?" she said. "About your existence." He said, 4 years. "About where you were, what you were doing, what you needed, about a year." She went very still. "A year," she said. "A year. You've been watching me for a year." "Monitoring," he said. "There's a difference." "Explain it." He met her eyes. "Watching is what Victor Kane was doing," he said. "Waiting for you to lead him somewhere useful. Monitoring is what I was doing. Making sure you were safe. Making sure no one reached you before I'd determined a way to approach you that wouldn't frighten you or put you in more danger." "And tonight," she said. "Tonight Victor moved sooner than I expected," he said. "He got intelligence I didn't know he had about your location and your routine. I had maybe 12 minutes to decide whether to approach you directly or lose the chance entirely. You chose directly." "I chose you," he said, "which is a different thing." Lena looked at him for a long moment. Margaret appeared at the edge of the kitchen and set a plate of something on the table without comment and disappeared again. "The evidence," Lena said finally. "My father hid it. You've spent 4 years looking and you haven't found it. Why are you telling me all of this if you think I don't know where it is?" "Because," Adrian said, "I don't think the location is something your father told you." He reached inside his coat again and set another photograph on the table. It was different from the first, more personal. Lena at 8 years old sitting on a man's shoulders, both of them looking at something out of frame. Something important enough that they were both completely focused on it. Her small face open with attention and something like wonder, his expression serious but engaged. She had never seen this photograph before. He carried that with him, Adrian said. It was in his personal effects, the things that were collected when he died. We obtained them. Lena stared at her 8-year-old face, at her father's expression beneath her. She felt something crack along a line she had not known was under pressure. "I don't know where it is," she said. Her voice was very flat. "Whatever he hid, wherever he hid it, he didn't tell me. I haven't heard from anyone connected to any of this in my entire life. I have worked in diners. I have paid my rent when I could pay it and been late when I couldn't. I have not led a life with secret knowledge in it." "I believe you," Adrian said. "Then what do you want from me?" "Right now," he said. "I want you to be somewhere Victor Kane can't reach you while I think about next steps. And after right now." "After right now," he said. "I'd like your help, voluntarily, with the choice to say no available to you at any point." She looked at him. "Help doing what?" "Finding what your father left," he said. "Because you may know something you don't know you know. A place, a memory. Something he said that didn't mean anything then but might mean something now." Lena thought about her father. The thin, apologetic man who had appeared when she was 17 and stayed for 3 days and spoken to her in the careful way of someone trying to give something without giving too much, like he was trying to leave her with something specific, without leaving her with the context that made it dangerous. She thought about what he had said. She turned the memories over in her mind, the way you turn over objects in a box, looking for the one that catches light differently. She put that down for now. "I want to call Rosa," she said. "The woman at the diner. She'll be worried." "I can have someone do that," Adrian said. "I'll do it myself," she said. "I want to hear her voice." He looked at her. Then he nodded and slid his phone across the table. She picked it up. Rosa answered on the second ring, her voice wound tight with something that unraveled slightly when she heard Lena. "Lena, thank God. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Lena said. "I'm sorry I left like that. I needed to go." "Who was that man?" Rosa said immediately. "Someone who's helping me with something," Lena said carefully. "Helping you? Lena, those men who came in?" "I know," Lena said. "I'm handling it, Rosa. I'm safe. I just needed you to know that." Rosa was quiet for a moment. "You're not going to tell me anything, are you?" "Not right now," Lena said. "But I'm okay." "You call me," Rosa said. "You hear me? You call me in the morning and you tell me you're still okay." "I will," Lena said. She hung up. She set the phone on the table and looked at it for a moment. "She's been working at that diner for 22 years, Lena said. "She gave me a shift when I was 19 and didn't know how to make coffee properly, and she never made me feel like a burden about it." Adrian said nothing. "I don't want her involved in any of this," Lena said. "She won't be," he said. "I need that to be a promise, not a reassurance." He looked at her steadily. "It's a promise," he said. They talked for 3 more hours. Not everything and not all at once. Adrian answered questions when she asked them, and she asked a great many. She had discovered over the years, someone who handled fear by seeking information, by understanding the structure of the danger, so she could find the edges of it and know what she was actually working with. Vague danger paralyzed her. Specific danger she could move around. She asked about Victor Kane, Adrian told her. He told her about a man who had shaped a generation of criminal enterprise in Chicago through a particular combination of intelligence and patience, who had been the kind of mentor that took up oxygen, who had positioned himself so completely at the center of the organization that extracting him had proven nearly impossible without dismantling everything around him. He told her about the moment 3 years ago when he had first understood what Victor had actually been doing in those private channels, what had been moving through the infrastructure while everyone else looked the other direction. He told her what her father's records, if they existed, and were what he believed them to be, would prove. She asked about the 3 men in the diner. Low level, he said, collectors. People Victor used when he wanted something retrieved quietly. The fact that he'd sent them directly to her place of work suggested he'd grown impatient. Or scared, Lena said. Adrian looked at her. "What made him finally move?" she said. "You said you'd been monitoring me for a year. He'd been watching me presumably longer than that. Why tonight? Why now? What changed?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Something changed in his position," he said. "I don't have all the details, but there are people who have become aware of the same possibility your father's evidence represents. People who have reasons of their own to want it found. Victor is running out of time to contain this before it becomes a conversation he can no longer control." "Who are these other people?" she said. "Federal." She absorbed that. "Okay," she said. She leaned back in her chair. The kitchen was quiet. Tom at the laptop had disappeared at some point, and Margaret had turned off the overhead light and left a smaller lamp on near the counter. And the room had the particular quality of late night that Lena recognized from many years of closing shifts. The feeling of a world that had wound down to its minimum, just the essential machinery still running. "My father," she said slowly. "He came to see me when I was 17. Just me. My mother was in the hospital for a treatment. He came to the apartment and we sat at the kitchen table and he talked for a while about things that didn't seem to matter. The neighborhood, how I was doing in school, whether I had friends. Adrian was completely still. And then he said something, she said, before he left. He said, "Remember that some things are better kept in the dark than the light." And I thought it was just something he was saying. A piece of advice from a father who had forfeited his right to give advice and was trying to offer something small that wouldn't be questioned. She looked at Adrian. "But he wasn't talking about advice," she said. Adrian leaned forward. "No," he said quietly. "He wasn't. He was telling me where." She said it slowly, trying out the shape of the understanding. Dark, not light. Her father, who had been gone for years, sitting across from her at a kitchen table giving her something in a container that wouldn't look like a container. "He developed photographs," she said. Her voice was barely above a murmur. "What?" Adrian said. "He used to develop photographs," she said. "When I was young, he had a dark room, a real one with chemicals with the red light. He taught me how to use it when I was 8. He said there was something specific about watching an image appear on paper in a dark room, something you couldn't get anywhere else." She looked at the photograph on the table, her 8-year-old face looking at something with wonder. She looked at her father's expression beneath her. She understood suddenly what they had been looking at in that photograph. What had been out of frame? "There was a dark room in the building on Woodlawn," she said. "He rented a studio space there for years. I don't know if he ever stopped paying the rent. He said it was where he kept his equipment. He said—" She stopped. She felt the memory settle into new shape. "He said it was the safest place for things that were fragile," she said. The kitchen was completely silent. Adrian was looking at her with an expression that had something in it she couldn't quite name. Not triumph, not excitement. Something more careful than that. "Lena," he said. "I know," she said. "You don't have to." "I know," she said again. "I'm not going to run there tonight. I understand that's not how this works. But I need you to hear what I just figured out, because keeping it to myself in a house I don't know with a man I don't know would be an extremely stupid decision, and I have spent a very long time not making extremely stupid decisions." He looked at her. "That's more trust than I've earned," he said. "Yes," she said. "Consider it a loan." Margaret showed her to a room on the second floor. Clean simply furnished a window that looked out on the side yard where the rain had slowed to something quieter. She changed into clothes that turned out to be in a bag on the chair clothes in her size. She did not ask how that was possible. She sat on the edge of the bed. She thought about her father. She thought about a man who had walked into a diner on Halsted Street in a black coat and quiet certainty, and she thought about the way the 3 men had contracted when he said his name. She thought about what he had said. "I want justice." She thought about whether that was true, and whether it mattered if it was. She had $12 in tip money in her apron pocket that was currently folded on the counter of a diner she might not go back to tomorrow. She had a landlord's notice at the bottom of her purse. She had a studio apartment with a drafty window. She had a memory of her father sitting at a kitchen table when she was 17 and telling her that some things were better kept in the dark than the light. She had spent 8 years not knowing what that meant. She lay down on the bed without taking off her shoes. She stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in this city, in a building on Woodlawn Avenue, in a room her father had rented, and maybe never stopped renting, in a dark room where images appeared on paper. In the absence of light, there was something her father had kept safe for years, at the cost of everything. She didn't know yet what it would cost to retrieve it. She didn't know yet what Adrian Moretti would become to her, or what she would become to him, or whether the trust she had extended as a loan tonight was the kind of loan that got repaid. She knew only that she had survived 19 years of keeping the lights on by herself, and that she had chosen tonight for the first time not to be invisible. She had followed a dangerous man out of a diner into the rain, and something in her chest, something she hadn't noticed, was cold, until it started warming, told her that the decision was exactly right, even if she couldn't explain why. Not yet. She woke up before the house did. That was habit. Lena had opened the diner at 6 in the morning enough times that her body had stopped requiring an alarm, had simply decided that darkness before dawn was its natural operating hour. She lay still for a moment on the unfamiliar bed and let the previous night organize itself in her memory. The three men, the rain, the black coat, the photograph of her father shaking hands with someone who apparently wanted her dead because of it. She sat up. She still had her shoes on. She crossed to the window and looked out at the side yard. The tree was old enough that even without its leaves, it had a presence, the kind of tree that had survived enough Chicago winters to stop being impressed by them. The rain had stopped. The street beyond the yard was beginning to show its early morning color, the gray that preceded everything else. She thought about the dark room on Woodlawn. She had not stopped thinking about it since the moment the memory clicked into place in the kitchen. But she had spent the hours between then and now deliberately not running forward with it, not constructing scenarios, not planning. Because planning without information was just anxiety with extra steps. And she had learned that too, from years of managing on her own. You moved when you had enough to move on. Not before. She heard movement downstairs. She found Margaret in the kitchen, already dressed, already making coffee with the efficiency of someone who had been awake for hours and considered sleep a logistical interruption. Margaret poured a cup and set it on the table in front of the chair Lena had sat in the night before without being asked. "Mr. Moretti is in the study," Margaret said. "He didn't sleep." "Is that common?" Lena said. "When something matters to him." Margaret said yes. She poured her own coffee and leaned against the counter and looked at Lena with the direct assessment of someone who had watched a great many people come through this house and had developed strong opinions about all of them. "He told me what you figured out," she said, "about the darkroom." "I assumed he would." "What you gave him last night," Margaret said carefully, "is more than anyone has given him in 4 years of looking. I want you to understand that." Lena wrapped both hands around the mug. "I want you to understand something too," she said. "I gave it to him because keeping it to myself in an unfamiliar house seemed more dangerous than sharing it. Not because I trust him completely." "That's reasonable," Margaret said. "I'm glad you think so. I've been with him for 11 years, Margaret said. "I've seen what kind of man he is in the situations that reveal what kind of man a person actually is. I'm not asking you to take my word for anything. I'm just telling you that what I've seen is consistent." Lena looked at her. "What's the most important thing you've seen?" she said. Margaret considered that seriously, which Lena appreciated. 4 years ago. Margaret said, "There was a man who worked for him. Low level. Driver. He got into trouble with a debt, a private debt, nothing to do with the organization. The people he owed were not patient people. Adrian found out because it's his business to know what's happening to the people around him. He paid the debt. He didn't tell the man who paid it. He didn't use it as leverage. He never mentioned it." "How do you know about it?" Lena said. "Because I handle the accounts," Margaret said simply. "And I know what the withdrawal was for, and I know Adrian didn't put it in any record that the driver would ever see." Lena was quiet. She thought about a man who paid a stranger's debt and kept it private. She thought about what kind of person did that. She picked up her coffee. "I need to call Rosa," she said. Adrian was at a desk in the study, with 3 phones arranged in a specific pattern in front of him, and a legal pad covered in handwriting when she appeared in the doorway. He looked up. He had the quality that people had when they'd been awake all night, but had spent the hours productively not ragged, but compressed like a spring coiled to a specific tension. "Did you sleep?" he said. "Some," she said. "Did you?" "No. Margaret told me." He leaned back slightly in the chair. "I've been making arrangements," he said. "For the building on Woodlawn. I want to move on it quickly but carefully. Victor knows he didn't get what he wanted last night. He'll regroup fast." How fast? She said. Hours, he said. Not days. She nodded. Tell me what you need from me. He looked at her for a moment. I need to know everything you remember about that darkroom, he said. Layout access the last time you were there, anything your father ever said about it specifically. She had been organizing this since she woke up. The building is on Woodlawn between 47th and 48th, she said. 5 stories. Mixed-use studios on the upper 3 floors. My father rented a space on the 4th floor. I was there maybe 5 times as a child the last time when I was 9 or 10. The darkroom was inside the studio space, not a separate rental. A room within a room. Black curtain at the entrance, red safe light inside the chemicals in specific order on the shelf to the left. Adrian was writing. The rent, he said. Do you know if he kept paying it? No, she said. But when he came to see me at 17, he said the studio was still there. He said it exactly once in passing, and at the time I thought he meant he still rented it. I had no reason to think otherwise. 17, he said. That was 9 years ago. If he was still paying then, the lease might have been long-term, she said, or paid forward. I don't know. I don't know how he managed money in the last years of his life. I don't know a great many things about him. She said the last sentence without inflection. Adrian looked at her. We can find out about the lease, he said. I have someone who can check the building's records quietly. How quietly? She said. Victor will not know we looked, he said. I'm confident of that. She accepted this. What else? She said. He set down the pen. You said he taught you how to use the darkroom when you were 8, he said. What does that mean specifically? What did he teach you? She thought about it. The red light. The smell of developer and fixer, the particular chemical combination that had lodged permanently in her sensory memory the way strong smells do in childhood. Her father's hands moving in the dim red glow, patient, precise, explaining each step. He taught me the whole process, she said. Developing film, making prints, the chemicals, the timing, the temperature. He said it was important to understand how an image was made, not just how to take a picture. He said the developing was where the real work happened. Adrian was very still. The real work happened in the dark, he said slowly. Yes, she said. They looked at each other. Whatever he left, Lena said. It's not just hidden in the room, it's in the process. You'd have to know what you were doing. Which means, Adrian said, that Victor's people, if they found the room, would find a dark room, chemicals, equipment. They would not know they were looking at the answer. Which also means, Lena said, that I may need to be the one who retrieves it. The study was quiet. No, Adrian said. You just said Victor will have people looking for me. You said hours, not days. If your goal is to retrieve that evidence before he does, and the evidence is in a form that requires specific knowledge to access, then I'm not a liability. I'm the mechanism. I'm not putting you in that building until I know it's safe. And if the window to make it safe closes before you've established it to your satisfaction, she said, then the 4 years you've spent looking for this become permanent. She wasn't angry. She was simply doing the calculation out loud clearly so they were both looking at the same numbers. He looked at her. Give me 6 hours, he said. You have 4, she said. Victor moves fast. You told me that yourself. He picked up the pen again. Fine, he said. 4. Odd. She spent those 4 hours learning the geography of a world she had never had reason to understand. Tom turned out to be not just a man with a laptop, but the specific kind of person who understood the movement of information through criminal networks, the way water engineers understood drainage, where it flowed naturally, where it pooled, where the pressure points were. He was 28, and from somewhere in Ohio, and had the quality of extreme competence housed in an extremely ordinary exterior, the kind of person who disappeared in rooms, which was probably the point. He showed her what they knew about Victor Kane's operation without being asked, because Adrian had told him to, she assumed, or because he could tell she was the kind of person who needed the full map rather than just the part she'd been assigned to navigate. Victor Kane was 61 years old. He had built his position across 4 decades of careful arrangement, which was the word Tom used for the specific combination of coercion leverage and genuine relationship building that sustained power at that level for that long. He was not simply feared. He was also in certain circles genuinely liked. That was what made him dangerous in the particular way he was dangerous. Respected by people who should know better, Lena said. Exactly, Tom said. He's good at making people feel seen, making them feel like he's chosen them specifically, like the attention is a gift. She thought about that. And Adrian, she said carefully. He fell for that. Tom's expression shifted slightly. He trusted someone he'd known his whole life, Tom said. That's not the same as being fooled. He was 22 when Victor first started mentoring him. You don't have the equipment to see certain things clearly at 22. What changed? 3 years ago, 2 people who worked for this organization disappeared, Tom said. They'd been asking questions about the private financial channels, questions that went slightly too close to the shape of what your father had documented. Lena went still. Victor, she said. It took Adrian 18 months to be certain, Tom said. And by the time he was Victor, had positioned himself in a way that made direct action impossible without dismantling so much of what surrounded him that the damage would have been catastrophic. So he needed the evidence, Lena said. He needs the evidence to be clean, Tom said. To do this in a way that ends Victor without creating a war that costs more than it resolves. She sat with that for a moment. She had spent the morning constructing her understanding of Adrian Moretti from the available material. Margaret's story about the driver's debt. Tom's flat recitation of facts. The way Adrian had said, "I want justice in the car," with the particular flatness of something that had been held for a long time. She was not naive enough to assign simple categories. He was not a good man in the way that term was usually meant. He existed in a world where the definitions of good and bad had been renegotiated by everyone around him from childhood, where power was the organizing principle and morality was something you maintained within whatever space power allowed you to maintain it. But she realized, beginning to believe that within the available space, he was trying to do something real. She wasn't ready to call that trust. She was ready to call it basis. At 11 in the morning, she came back to the study. The building on Woodlawn, she said. What did you find? Adrian looked up from the phones. The studio on the 4th floor is still in your father's name, he said. The rent is paid through an account at a bank on Michigan Avenue. The account was funded in a single lump sum 8 years ago, just before he died. The amount covers rent at the original rate through approximately next spring. She heard her own heartbeat. Her father had arranged, from whatever money he'd managed to access in the last months of his life, to keep the studio safe until someone came looking. He had not known who would come. He had not known if anyone would come. He had simply kept the door open. He trusted that someone would eventually find it, she said. Or that you would, Adrian said quietly. She moved to the chair across from the desk and sat down. Victor's people, she said. Where are they? Distributed, he said. He's looking, but he doesn't know where. That's our advantage. He knows you're gone and that I have you, but he doesn't know about the building on Woodlawn. Because my father never told anyone, she said. Correct. So right now the only people who know about that room are you and me and Tom. And Margaret, he said. 4 people, she said. 4 people, he confirmed. She thought about the chain of custody on that information. She thought about what it meant that her father had sent her an encrypted message inside an ordinary sentence 9 years ago, and she had carried it without knowing all those years of tips and overdue notices and surviving. And never once had the knowledge put her in danger, because the knowledge had been dormant waiting. It had only become dangerous when she started to understand what it meant. Tonight, she said. Adrian looked at her. We go tonight, she said. While Victor is still regrouping, while the information hasn't spread, before someone makes a connection we don't know about. He considered. 3 hours of preparation, he said. Agreed. But the 3 hours produced something neither of them had accounted for. Tom called her name from the kitchen with a specific quality in his voice. Not alarm, something more controlled than alarm, but in the same territory. Lena came quickly and Adrian was already there, standing behind Tom and looking at the laptop screen with the focused stillness of someone absorbing something they had prepared themselves not to react to. "What is it?" she said. Tom turned the laptop to face her. The screen showed a photograph. A diner on Halsted Street. Yellow tape across the front door. 2 police cruisers visible at the edge of the frame. Her diner. "This morning," Tom said. "About 40 minutes ago." Lena felt the blood drain from her face in a single cold wave. "Rosa," she said. "The employee who was on shift is fine," Tom said immediately, with the emphasis of someone who understood exactly which question to answer first. She was questioned by police and released. No one was hurt. Lena let out a breath that had gotten stuck. "Then what happened?" she said. "Someone ransacked the back of house," Tom said. "Storage areas. Lena's locker specifically. It was targeted, not random." "Victor," Adrian said. It wasn't a question. "Looking for something she might have kept at work," Tom said. "A key, documents, anything she might have accessed if the studio address was registered anywhere in her name." "It's not," Adrian said. "Victor doesn't know that," Tom said. Lena was looking at the photograph of her diner with the yellow tape across it, and she was feeling something she recognized as anger. But that was also something more specific than anger. The feeling of someone reaching into the ordinary materials of your life and pulling at them, the deliberate violation of the small and particular things that had sustained you. She had worked in that diner for 6 years. She had counted tips at that counter through 2 evictions and a car that died, and the anniversary of her mother's death every November, the small, reliable continuity of the work that meant she could get through whatever else was happening, because there was always the next shift, always the next table, always the next $12. They had put yellow tape across it. They had torn through her locker. They had walked through Rosa's space with their hands looking for something to use against her. "This changes the timeline," she said. "Lena, this changes the timeline," she said again, and her voice had a quality in it that made both Adrian and Tom stop. "Victor just proved that he is willing to go after things connected to me that have nothing to do with anything. Rosa has nothing to do with any of this. That diner has nothing to do with any of this. And he sent people there anyway because he's willing to pull at every thread until something unravels." She turned to Adrian. "We don't have 3 hours," she said. "We go now." "Lena, we haven't established perimeter." "You have 2 people watching the building on Woodlawn," she said. "You told me that an hour ago. You have a car and a driver. You have Tom and whatever Tom carries. And I know he carries something, because that is not a man who goes into uncertain situations without preparation." She looked at Tom briefly. Tom did not deny it. "And you have me, who is the only person in this room who has actually been inside that dark room." Adrian was looking at her with the expression she had seen the night before in the diner, when he decided to reach for her hand. The expression of someone completing a calculation quickly. 15 minutes, he said. 15 minutes, she said. Cumb. The building on Woodlawn was exactly as she remembered from the outside, which was its own particular strangeness, the way places from childhood maintain their shape even when everything else changes. She had expected to feel small in front of it. She felt alert instead. They entered through a side door. Tom went first. Adrian stayed close to her in a way that was not aggressive, but was completely deliberate, positioning his body relative to hers, with the efficiency of someone who had done this kind of work before and understood exactly where the vulnerable angles were. The elevator was old and slow, and she said nothing in it. The 4th-floor hallway smelled like old building, the accumulated breath of a place that had held many different kinds of work over many decades. She counted doors from the elevator. Her father had taught her to count from fixed points. She had thought that was just how he was. Now she understood it differently. Studio 412. The lock was a standard deadbolt with a key she did not have. Adrian produced a small tool, and the door opened in less than a minute, and she filed that away without comment, because now was not the time. Inside was exactly what she had expected, and completely different from what she had expected in the way memory is always slightly wrong about scale and exactly right about feeling. The studio space was small and organized the organization of someone who valued function over appearance. A shelf of equipment, a work table, a black curtain across the far wall. She walked directly to the curtain. She pushed through it. The red safe light was not on. She found the switch by memory, the particular location her body knew before her mind caught up to direct it, and the room filled with the low garnet light that had defined this space in her earliest memory of it. Adrian was behind her. She could feel him not speaking, not asking, giving her the room to do what she came to do. She looked at the shelf. The chemicals were still there, arranged in the order she remembered developers' stop bath fixer in their brown bottles with the labels her father had written by hand. 8 years old, and the chemicals were still exactly placed. She picked up the developer bottle. She uncapped it. The chemical smell hit her like a door opening into the past, and for one moment, one full second, she was 8 years old, standing in red light beside a man who was trying to give her something that would protect her without her knowing it was protection. She pressed her mouth together. She turned the bottle over. A small capsule fell into her palm, sealed waterproof the size of a battery. The kind of capsule you use to protect something from the chemical environment it was stored inside. Her hand closed around it. "Lena," Adrian said quietly behind her. "I have it," she said. She turned. She held it out to him and then stopped. Because something in her, something that had survived 19 years of depending on no one and keeping the lights on alone and making decisions without a partner, said, "Look at it first." "What's in it?" she said. "I don't know specifically," he said. "I believe it's a drive, possibly documentation, possibly both. Before we leave this room," she said, "I want to understand what my father actually built." "We need to move, Lena." "I know we need to move," she said. "I'm asking for 60 seconds. Is there a reader for this in here?" He looked at her. He did not tell her that 60 seconds was too long. He did not tell her this wasn't the moment. He turned to Tom, who was standing at the curtain entrance, and Tom reached into his jacket and produced a small device, compact, portable, and handed it over. Adrian connected the capsule. The device displayed a file index. Lena read the names of the files, and she understood for the first time the full scale of what her father had built in secret over 2 years inside a criminal enterprise while keeping his family in the dark and paying forward the rent on this room for 8 years beyond his own life, so the answer would be here when someone finally came looking. It was enormous. Not just Victor Kane. The documents contained in that capsule reached into law enforcement, into municipal government, into financial institutions, into the infrastructure of the city itself. Her father had not simply documented a crime. He had documented a system. 15 years of architecture built by one careful, patient man with the specific goal of remaining invisible while controlling everything around him. "My God," she said softly. "Yes," Adrian said. "He documented all of this," she said. "He did all of this knowing he probably wouldn't survive to see anyone use it." "Yes." She looked at the capsule. She thought about her father sitting at a kitchen table when she was 17, thin and apologetic, trying to give her something in a container that didn't look like a container. She thought about the photograph of herself at 8 years old on his shoulders, both of them looking at something out of frame. She thought he was looking at this room. Even then, he was always looking at this room. "All right," she said. "Let's go." They were on the 3rd floor stairwell when Tom's phone went. He answered it. He listened. He looked at Adrian with an expression that was very controlled. "2 of Victor's people just entered the building," he said. "Ground floor." Adrian's hand moved to Lena's arm. Not gripping, just present. "Other exit," he said to Tom. Fire stairs on the north side, Tom said. But they'll have someone watching the street. How many did your contacts see? At least 4, Tom said. Possibly 6. Lena looked at the capsule in Adrian's hand. They don't know we already have it, she said. No, Adrian said. Then we split, she said. You take the drive, I go out the front. Both men looked at her. They're looking for me, she said. Not you. If I go out the front, they'll follow me. It gives you the exit with the drive. Absolutely not, Adrian said. I'm not asking permission, she said. I'm presenting the most logical option. You can't let them take that capsule. You've spent 4 years. I'm not using you as bait, he said. I'm not bait, she said. I'm a distraction with agency. There's a significant difference. Lena. His voice had a quality she hadn't heard in it before. Not authority. Something more personal than authority. I am not letting you walk out the front of this building into 4 of Victor Kane's people. She looked at him. She saw something in his face that was not calculation. It was the same expression the man in the photograph had when he was standing beneath his 8-year-old daughter, watching something that mattered to him. She had recognized it then, without knowing what it meant. She recognized it now. Then what's your plan? She said. Tom, he said without looking away from her. Tom was already on the phone. He spoke for 20 seconds. He hung up. There's a service entrance on the east side, Tom said, used by building maintenance. Victor's people don't have it covered because they don't have a full map of the building. We have 40 seconds before the 2 coming up the main stairwell reach this floor. Go, Adrian said. Tom moved. Adrian's hand stayed close to her arm, not guiding, not controlling, simply there, and they moved quickly through the 3rd-floor corridor in the direction Tom indicated, the specific quality of urgency that didn't become panic, that stayed functional, because panic cost seconds you couldn't afford. The service entrance was where Tom said it was. They went through it. The street on the east side was empty. They kept moving. A block away, a different car than the one from the night before was waiting with the engine running, and a driver she hadn't seen before who pulled into traffic the moment the door closed. Lena sat back. She realized her hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, from aftermath, from the adrenaline finding its way out now that the immediate pressure had released. She looked at the capsule in Adrian's hand. She looked at his hands. He was not shaking. That happens to me too, he said without looking at the capsule or at her shaking hands. It just doesn't happen during. She looked at him. What happens during? She said. Clarity, he said. Everything else goes quiet, and what's left is exactly what needs to happen next. She thought about that. My father was like that, she said, and surprised herself by saying it. Adrian looked at her then. She turned toward the window. Outside Chicago was going about its ordinary morning, the specific indifference of a large city, people moving to their jobs, their errands, their obligations, the visible machinery of a place that would not pause for any individual drama. She had moved through this city invisibly for years. She did not feel invisible right now. She felt for the first time in a long time like a person with weight. Like someone whose presence in a room changed the room. Not because of anything she had done particularly, but because of what she now understood. She carried not just the drive in Adrian's hand, but the knowledge her father had placed in her, without her knowing the encoded message in an ordinary sentence, the whole long, careful love of a man who had tried to protect her, the only way available to him. She pressed her forehead briefly against the cool glass of the window. She heard Adrian speak quietly to Tom about the capsule, about protocols, about next steps she was not yet fully part of. And she thought about what it meant to have been found after all these years of being invisible, not by someone who needed something from her, not by someone who wanted to use her, but by someone who had been watching over the distance to make sure she was safe before he ever needed anything at all. She wasn't ready to name what that felt like. But she was, for the first time in a very long time, not carrying it alone. The car moved through the city. And in his hand, her father's life's work rode safely toward whatever came next. The capsule sat on the kitchen table at the safe house, and nobody touched it for a full 4 minutes. That was how long it took Tom to set up the secure reader, the encrypted partition, the isolated system that had no connection to any network Victor Kane's people could reach. 4 minutes of deliberate, careful preparation, while Lena sat across the table and Adrian stood near the window with his back to the room, the particular posture of a man managing something internal that he had not yet decided to share. She watched him. She had been watching him since the car, cataloging the small things. The way his jaw shifted when he was processing. The way his hands stayed completely still when everything else around him was moving. The way he had said her name in the stairwell with that quality she still hadn't fully named the thing that sounded like someone protecting something they hadn't meant to care about yet. She filed all of it. Tom said, "Ready." Adrian turned from the window. He sat down at the table. He connected the capsule. He looked at the file index and then at Lena. "You looked at the names earlier," he said, "before we left the dark room. What did you see?" 15 years of documentation, she said. Financial records, communications names. Not just Victor Kane, the whole network. Everything connected to everything. How organized. "My father was an accountant," she said. "What do you think?" Something moved across Adrian's face. Not quite a smile. The acknowledgement of one. Tom opened the first file. And for the next 2 hours, the three of them went through what Thomas Carter had built. It was meticulous. That was the word. Not just thorough, not just comprehensive, but meticulous in the way of someone who understood that incomplete evidence was the same as no evidence, who had anticipated every possible challenge and built the record to answer it in advance. Dates, times, transaction amounts, the paper trails that connected shell companies to real ones, the communications that tied instructions to outcomes, the names of the people in the rooms where the decisions were made. Victor Kane appeared on every significant page, but he was not the only name. "Judge Carver," Tom said, looking at the screen with the flat voice of someone trying not to show what he was feeling. "He's been on the federal bench for 9 years. "Senator Millen's chief of staff," Adrian said. He was looking at a different file. 3 separate payments, different accounts each time. "My father documented all of it," Lena said quietly. "All of it," Tom confirmed. She thought about her father spending 2 years inside this structure, watching, recording, understanding the full shape of what he'd walked into. She thought about the weight of that. Carrying all of that knowledge, working alongside these people every day, performing the ordinary tasks of an accountant while understanding completely what the numbers actually meant. She thought about what it cost a person to hold something like that. "He couldn't go to the police," she said. "Not with Judge Carver on there, not knowing how far into law enforcement any of this reached." "No," Adrian said. "He couldn't trust any single institution completely, so he documented everything, and he hid it, and he made sure the hiding place was somewhere only one person would ever think to look. He was waiting for the right person," she said. "He was waiting for you," Adrian said. She looked at the screen. She was not going to cry in front of these men. She had not cried in front of anyone in approximately 4 years, and she was not going to reset that record now. But something was happening in her chest that required a specific kind of management, the kind she was practiced at the deliberate redistribution of feeling, from the center of the body outward to the hands, the work of staying functional. She pressed her palms flat on the table. "What do we do with it?" she said. Adrian had been waiting for that question. She could tell from the way he answered it, without any searching, without any prefacing, directly and completely. "There's a federal prosecutor in this city who is not on any page in those files," he said. "Her name is Catherine Marsh. She has been building a case against elements of Victor's operation for 3 years with incomplete evidence. What your father left is not just completion, it's transformation. It changes the case from a possible conviction to an inevitable one." "How do you know she's clean?" Lena said. "Because I've had her investigated by 3 separate people over 2 years, he said. "Because she's prosecuted 2 cases that directly cost people connected to Victor significantly. Because Victor himself spent money trying to compromise her and failed, which I know because I have the record of the attempt." Lena looked at him. "You've been building toward Catherine Marsh for 2 years," she said. "I've been building toward whoever had a clean record and a functioning case," he said. "Marsh is who the evidence produced. How do we get the capsule to her without Victor knowing?" "Carefully," he said. "And not today." She accepted this with a nod. "Then what happens today?" she said. Adrian looked at her, and then he said something she did not expect. "Today," he said, "I have to ask you to trust me in a way that's going to be very difficult." The quality of the room changed slightly. Tom was looking at the table. "What does that mean?" she said. "There's someone who needs to believe for a period of time that I don't care about you," he said. "Someone who needs to see me treating you as if what happened last night was a tactical decision, not a personal one. If Victor thinks you matter to me, you become a tool he can use against me. He's done it before. He will do it again." She looked at him steadily. "You're telling me you're going to perform indifference," she said. "I'm telling you that what you will see and hear me say in certain situations will not reflect what I actually believe," he said. "And I'm telling you that now directly, so that when it happens, you have the context." "When will it happen?" "I don't know exactly," he said. "Victor has people in a number of spaces I move through publicly. He'll be watching how I react to last night, what I do next, whether I'm pulling resources to protect someone, or whether last night was simply me neutralizing a nuisance before it complicated my own plans." She sat with that for a moment. She thought about what it felt like to be called a nuisance. She thought about what it felt like to be told in advance that you were going to be called one by someone who was currently looking at her with an expression that had nothing nuisance adjacent in it. "All right," she said. "That's it," he said. "You gave me context," she said. "You told me before instead of after. I'd rather work with something I understand than fight something I don't." She paused. "But I want the same from you. If you need me to do something, you tell me why. You don't position me without explaining the position." "Agreed," he said immediately. "And you don't make decisions about my safety without consulting me first." "That one I can't fully promise," he said honestly. "If the decision needs to happen in 2 seconds, I'm going to make it and explain after." She looked at him. "Fair," she said. "But if you have 10 seconds, you use one of them on me." "Agreed," he said. Tom, who had been sitting very still and looking at the table throughout this exchange, cleared his throat quietly. "We should move the capsule," he said. "Not keep it here." "Already arranged," Adrian said. "When?" Lena said. "While we were in this car," he said. She nodded. She stood up from the table. "I need air," she said, not asking permission, stating. "The back garden," Margaret said from the doorway, appearing with the specific timing of a person who had been listening and had judged this the appropriate moment to offer an exit. "It's private. No sightlines from the street." Lena went. She stood in the cold morning air and let it work on her, the way cold worked, clarifying, contracting everything to its necessary size. She had found her father's life's work in a darkroom that smelled like developer and old chemicals, and 20 years of careful secrecy. She had carried it out of a building while Victor Kane's people came through the front door. She had sat in a kitchen and watched 2 men go through the thing her father had built, at the cost of his life and his family and whatever else he had given up in those years. And she had held herself together through all of it, with the same practiced containment she brought to counting tips and folding landlord's notices. But out here alone in the cold, she let herself feel the full weight of it for 1 minute. Her father had loved her. Not in the ways she had grown up cataloging as love presents, consistency, ordinary Tuesdays. He had loved her in the only way he could manage in the circumstances he had made and been made by at a distance carefully, with a plan that took years and cost everything, and was built to keep her safe even after he was no longer there to do it directly. She did not know yet if that was enough. She suspected it would take her a long time to know, but she knew that he had thought of her. That in a dark room in Chicago, he had arranged the chemicals in the order she would remember and sealed the capsule inside the one she would open first, and waited across 8 years of death for her to walk through a black curtain and find it. She pressed the backs of her hands against her eyes for a moment. She breathed. She was ready. She went back inside. The afternoon moved with the specific quality of controlled urgency that Adrian operated in naturally, which Lena was beginning to understand was not a performance. It was his actual resting state, the organizational expression of a mind that was always running parallel tracks, the immediate situation, and the three scenarios downstream from it simultaneously. She found she could keep up with it. That surprised her slightly. She had expected to feel like an observer inside his world, someone being managed around the real work. Instead, she found herself consistently ahead of where he was going, seeing the next question before he finished answering the current one. At one point, he looked at her across the kitchen table while they were going over what Catherine Marsh would need in order to move, and he said, "You think fast. I've been solving problems alone my whole life," she said. "You get efficient." He was quiet for a moment. "Your father thought fast, too," he said. "From what I've been able to piece together, the way the documentation is structured, the redundancies he built in the way he anticipated challenges. It's not just thoroughness. It's a particular kind of intelligence." She thought about this. "He never went to college," she said. "He talked about it sometimes, like it was something he'd missed. But the way he explained things was always very precise, very structured." "Yes," Adrian said. "That tracks with the documents." She looked at him. "You sound like you admire him," she said. "I think," he said carefully, "that he was a man who found himself in an impossible situation and did something extraordinary with it. Whether I admire him or not is complicated by the fact that the situation he was in was connected to my organization. Connected to Victor," she said, "not to you. The distinction matters to me," he said. "It may not matter to others." She nodded slowly. "The people who disappeared 3 years ago," she said. "The ones who were asking questions. Were they people you were close to?" He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. She didn't push further. She understood that there were rooms in this man that she did not yet have access to that would take time and evidence of their own to open. She was not in a position to push on closed rooms. She barely had access to the hallway. Tom appeared at the kitchen entrance. "There's a problem," he said. Lena felt the specific drop in her stomach that had become familiar over the past 18 hours, the moment before the situation changed. "Victor called a meeting," Tom said. "Senior people, tonight." Adrian was very still. "Where?" he said. "The Meridian Club," Tom said. "Private dining room. The kind of meeting he calls when he's reassessing a situation." "How did you get this?" Adrian said. "Danvers," Tom said. The name meant nothing to Lena, but it clearly meant something to Adrian because his expression shifted slightly. "He reached out 20 minutes ago. Said Victor is calling the room specifically about last night. About Lena." The two men looked at each other across a meaning Lena was not yet part of. "What does Danvers want?" Adrian said. "He wants to know if you're going to the meeting," Tom said. Adrian looked at Lena. "Danvers is someone with 1 foot in my organization and 1 foot in Victor's," he said, explaining to her directly without being asked. "He's been that way for years. It's a structural reality I've managed rather than eliminated because he's useful in exactly this kind of situation. He tells you what Victor is doing," she said. "And presumably tells Victor certain things about me," he said. "Within limits I've established." "Carefully managed," she said. "Everything is carefully managed," he said. "The alternative is chaos." "Are you going to the meeting?" she said. "I have to," he said. "Not going would signal something. Victor would read absence as either fear or positioning. And going signals that I'm unconcerned," he said. "That last night was a minor operational decision that doesn't require me to hide." She thought about this. "It's also an opportunity," she said. He looked at her. "Victor will be watching how you talk about me," she said. "If you go to that meeting and handle it right, you tell him exactly the story you want him to have." "Yes," he said. "Which means tonight is when you perform the indifference you warned me about this morning." "Yes," he said. She held his gaze. Go to the meeting, she said. Something moved in his face. Lena, I know what it means, she said. You told me this morning. I'm telling you I understand it. Go to the meeting. Tell whatever story keeps me safe and keeps Victor looking the wrong direction. That's the goal. He looked at her for a moment longer. 3 hours, he said. I'll be back in 3 hours. I'll be here, she said. He left with Tom. Margaret stayed. Lena sat in the kitchen with another cup of tea she barely touched and went through the mental architecture of the situation with the same systematic approach she brought to everything. She was safe for 3 hours. Victor was being told a story. The capsule was in transit to wherever Adrian had arranged for it to go. Catherine Marsh existed somewhere in this city with 3 years of incomplete evidence that was about to become complete. This was all movement in the right direction. She should feel better than she did. She examined the feeling. It was not fear. She had felt genuine fear last night in the diner, and she knew what that felt like, the cold animal signal of the body identifying danger. This was something different. This was the specific discomfort of caring about an outcome that someone else was controlling. She had not experienced that in a long time, because she had not in a long time cared about an outcome that involved another person. She was careful with this recognition. She did not build on it or follow it forward. She simply acknowledged it and set it aside the way you set aside something fragile when you need both hands for the immediate task. Margaret appeared with food, an actual meal this time, not just tea and something on a plate. Lena ate it without registering what it was. He's going to be all right, Margaret said. I know, Lena said. He's been in worse rooms. I believe you. Margaret sat down across from her. May I ask you something, she said. You can ask, Lena said. I may not answer. Fair, Margaret said with the trace of something that was almost amusement. The darkroom this morning, when you found it, when you held the capsule. Lena waited. Were you afraid? Margaret said. Lena thought about it honestly. No, she said. I was sad, which I didn't expect. Margaret nodded slowly. Because it meant your father was exactly what Adrian believed him to be, she said. And that's a complicated thing to discover about someone you lost. Lena looked at her. You're very perceptive for a housekeeper, she said. I am not a housekeeper, Margaret said with complete pleasantness. I run operations. I manage logistics. I keep 14 things from falling apart simultaneously. I make tea because it is useful and because it gives me a reason to be in the room when conversations are happening. Lena stared at her. You're his operations manager, she said. Among other things, Margaret said. And the tea is always strategic, Margaret said. For the first time in 2 days, Lena laughed. It came out smaller than a laugh, more like the pressurized release of something that had been held too long, but it was genuine, and Margaret received it with quiet satisfaction and got up to refill the kettle. Adrian came back in 2 hours and 40 minutes. He came through the front door and crossed directly to the kitchen where Lena was sitting with Margaret, and the look on his face told her before he spoke that the meeting had not gone the way he'd planned. Sit down, she said. He sat. What happened? She said. Victor Kane is significantly more prepared than I calculated, he said. He had information at that meeting I don't understand the source of. Details about the Woodlawn building, not the darkroom specifically, but the building. He knows we were there this morning. Lena felt the cold drop. How? She said. Someone in the building, Tom said from behind Adrian. A tenant, a maintenance person we don't know yet. But Victor had enough to know we were on Woodlawn this morning and enough to be asking very specific questions about what we found there. But he doesn't know about the capsule, Lena said. No, Adrian said. Because if he knew about the capsule, he wouldn't be asking questions. He would be acting. So he knows we were there, but not what we got, she said. That's still an advantage. A shrinking one, Adrian said. He looked at her directly. There's something else, he said. She waited. At the meeting, Victor said something, he said. He said that your father's documentation, whatever form it takes, is useless without corroboration, that any competent defense attorney would argue it was fabricated, planted, created by someone with a motive to destroy him. She processed this. He's not wrong, she said slowly. My father is dead. The chain of custody for anything he created is complicated. A defense could argue. Yes, Adrian said, which is why what Victor said next matters. She looked at him. He said he has someone, Adrian said. Someone who was present for certain key transactions. Someone whose testimony would be used to challenge any documentation that emerged. Someone who can contradict specific dates and amounts. A witness on his side, she said. A witness who may not know they're on his side, Adrian said carefully. The kitchen was very quiet. Who? She said. Adrian reached into his jacket and set a photograph on the table. It was a man she didn't recognize. 50s gray at the temples, the look of someone who had lived carefully and spent a long time managing the appearance of ordinary life. His name is Gerald Sims, Adrian said. He worked in the same financial network your father worked in. Not the same department, not connected to your father directly, but adjacent. He left the network years before your father did. He's been living quietly in Indianapolis for a decade. Lena looked at the photograph. You said he may not know he's on Victor's side, she said. Victor will approach him as a legitimate witness, Adrian said. He'll be told he's being asked to testify about financial records he worked with legitimately. He won't be told he's being used to undermine your father's documentation. He'll simply be a man with genuine memories of that period who says what he remembers. And what he remembers will be selectively useful to Victor, she said. Yes, Adrian said, because Victor will have shaped the questions. She sat back. We need to talk to Sims first, she said. Yes, Adrian said, before Victor does. Victor is sending someone to Indianapolis tomorrow morning, Tom said. The implications settled. Tonight, Lena said. Tonight, Adrian confirmed. She looked at the photograph of Gerald Sims, a man who had worked near her father 15 years ago and who now existed at the edge of a story he didn't fully know he was part of. I'm coming, she said. Lena, I'm coming, she said again. Because Gerald Sims is not going to trust you alone. He doesn't know you. You're going to walk into his house and tell him he's connected to something dangerous and ask him to choose a side, and he's going to need a reason. And you're the reason, Adrian said. I'm Thomas Carter's daughter, she said. If there's a man who knew my father, who worked near him, who might have trusted him, then yes, I am the reason. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. He thought about saying no. She could see him think about it. All right, he said. Good. Indianapolis was 3 hours by car. They left at 8 in the evening. Lena and Adrian and Tom and the driver, the same quiet motion through the night that had characterized everything since the diner, the city sliding away behind them, and the interstate opening up dark and direct ahead. She and Adrian sat in the back. For the first 20 minutes they didn't speak. She looked at her hands in her lap, and he looked out the window at the highway, and the absence of conversation was not uncomfortable, which she registered as information. What did you say about me? She said. At the meeting. He turned from the window. I said you were a tactical complication that I'd neutralized, he said. I said the situation last night was about keeping Victor from acquiring something that would complicate my own interests, not about protecting you specifically. And they believed it, she said. Most of them, he said. Victor himself I'm less certain about. What did he say? He said, Adrian said carefully, that it was interesting how quickly I'd moved on someone I claimed not to know. He's suspicious, she said. Victor is always suspicious, he said. It's the quality that's kept him alive this long. But suspicious is different from certain. He's watching. What do we do about that? We give him nothing to confirm, he said. We move carefully. We don't give him a pattern that adds up to more than what I told him. She nodded. Outside the highway was dark and flat, and the lights of other cars moved past in the other direction like brief punctuation. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. He looked at her. "When did you know," she said, "about Victor? The exact moment." He was quiet for a long time, long enough that she thought he might not answer. "There was a night 3 years ago," he said, "after the two men disappeared. I was going through records looking for the pattern that would explain it, and I found a transaction I couldn't account for. A payment. The amount was specific enough that it wasn't overhead, and it wasn't payroll, but it wasn't unusual enough to flag a review." "What was it for?" she said. "I didn't know at first," he said. "I traced it. It took 6 weeks. At the end of 6 weeks, I understood that the payment was made to someone who had confirmed a location. A location where those two men could be found." She felt the cold settle. "He paid someone to find them," she said. "He paid someone to confirm they were where he thought they were," Adrian said, "so that what happened next would be efficient." She looked at his profile. "And you had trusted him your whole life," she said. "I had trusted him my whole life," he said. She thought about what it would cost to discover after a lifetime that the person who had shaped your understanding of the world had been managing you the whole time. That the trust you'd extended wasn't received but used. She thought about her own version of that. The father who had left. The absence she'd turned over for years looking for a shape she could accept. "I understand that," she said. He looked at her. "I know you do," he said. The car moved through the dark. Gerald Sims lived in a house in a quiet Indianapolis neighborhood that had the quality of a life arranged around the specific goal of being undisturbed. Medium house older. The kind of well-maintained ordinary that required consistent effort and suggested someone who found order comforting. It was 10:30 when they arrived. There was a light on in the front room. Tom went first. That was the arrangement. Tom knocked and identified himself as someone with information about a shared former employer, and when the door opened 3 inches on a chain, Tom spoke for 30 seconds through the gap. The chain came off. The door opened fully. Lena and Adrian went in. Gerald Sims stood in his front hallway and looked at them with the expression of a man who had been careful for a decade and was now watching his carefulness end. He was 58. Up close, the careful life showed in specific ways the kind of controlled neutrality that came from years of managing what you let your face show. His eyes went to Lena. He went very still. "You look like him," he said. "I know," she said. "Thomas Carter's daughter," he said. "Yes." He looked at Adrian. "And you're Moretti," he said. "Not afraid. Something more complicated than afraid." "Yes," Adrian said. "Come in," Gerald Sims said. And he turned and walked into his own house with the posture of a man who had known this conversation was going to arrive eventually and had simply not known when. They sat in the front room. Gerald Sims looked at his hands for a moment and then looked at Lena. "How did he die?" he said. "Your father. The real way. Not what I read." "I don't know the real way," Lena said honestly. "I was told a heart attack. I've spent the last 2 days developing reasons to doubt that." Gerald nodded slowly. "He was healthy," Gerald said. "The last time I saw him. Thin maybe. Tired. But healthy." "When was the last time?" Lena said. "About 8 months before he died," he said. "He came to see me here. He knew I'd left by then. He didn't explain why he was coming. He just showed up and sat where you're sitting and said he needed me to know that he was working on something important, and that if anything ever happened to him, and if anyone ever contacted me about that period of time, I should remember that Thomas Carter was a good man who did what he believed was right." The room was very quiet. "He came to see you," Lena said slowly. "Yes." "He told you to remember he was a good man." "Yes." She looked at Adrian. She saw the same recognition move through his expression. Her father had known Gerald Sims might be needed. He had come to prepare him. 8 months before he died, He had been building the corroboration that would make his documentation credible, placing the pieces not just in the darkroom, but in the memories of people who could confirm the shape of what they'd been inside. He was not just an accountant. He was a man who had thought like a prosecutor. "Mr. Sims," Adrian said, "someone is going to contact you tomorrow. They'll tell you they represent a legal proceeding, and they need your recollection of certain transactions from the period you worked in that network." Gerald looked at him without surprise. "And they'll be working for Victor Kane," he said. "Yes," Adrian said. "I've been expecting something like this for years," Gerald said. "Not this specifically, but something. You don't walk away from what I walked away from and believe it's permanent." "What did you walk away from?" Lena said. Gerald looked at her. "I saw things I shouldn't have seen," he said. "I wasn't as deep as your father. I wasn't keeping records, but I understood what was happening around me, and I made a choice to leave before I became part of it in a way I couldn't reverse." "Did my father know you'd seen those things?" she said. "I think he suspected," Gerald said. "We never spoke directly about it. That was how it worked in that environment. You protected each other by not confirming what you both understood." She thought about two men in an office moving through the same dangerous knowledge on parallel tracks, never intersecting, protecting each other by pretending not to see the same things. She thought about what her father had done with what he saw. "Will you help us?" she said. Gerald looked at her steadily. "What does that mean specifically?" he said. "It means not talking to the people who contact you tomorrow," Adrian said. "It means being willing at the right time and in the right forum to speak to a federal prosecutor about what you experienced in that period, about what you observed, about the conversation Thomas Carter had with you in this room 8 months before he died." Gerald was quiet. "A federal prosecutor," he said. "Catherine Marsh," Adrian said. "Her office is clean. I've verified it." "I'd need to verify it myself," Gerald said. "That's reasonable," Adrian said. "I can give you what I have, and you can make your own assessment." Gerald looked at Lena again. "He talked about you," he said. "That visit, when he was sitting in that chair. He didn't say your name, but he talked about his daughter the way a person talks when the person they're talking about is the whole reason they're doing the thing they're doing." Lena's hands were flat on her knees. She pressed them harder. "Did he seem afraid?" she said. "No," Gerald said. "That's what I remember most clearly. He seemed like a man who had already moved through the fear and come out the other side of it, like he'd made his peace with whatever was going to happen, and what was left was just the work." She breathed. "All right," Gerald Sims said. "Tell me what you need." They were back in the car by midnight. The drive back to Chicago stretched out dark and long, and Lena sat with the accumulated weight of the day pressing down on her in a way she was no longer certain she could continue distributing efficiently. She thought about her father visiting Gerald Sims 8 months before he died. She thought about a man who had made his peace with what was going to happen, and what was left was just the work. She pressed her head back against the seat. "Hey," Adrian said quietly, not asking a question, just indicating presence. "I'm all right," she said. "I know," he said. "That's not why I said it." She turned her head to look at him. He was looking at her with the expression she had catalogued over 2 days, and still could not fully name the expression that was not calculation and not authority, and not the careful management of everything around him. It was something that lived underneath all of those things. Something that looked more than anything like recognition. Like a person seeing something clearly that they'd been trying to see for a long time. "He built it for you," Adrian said quietly. "All of it. The documentation, the capsule, the visit to Sims. He built a chain of evidence that would be credible without him, because he understood he wouldn't be there to make it credible himself. And he built it so that when the time came, you would be the one to put it together." "He couldn't have known I'd find the darkroom," she said. "He knew you well enough to know how you think," Adrian said. "He taught you to count from fixed points. He taught you the chemicals in their specific order. He left you the encoded message in an ordinary sentence, and he trusted that you were exactly the kind of person who would eventually understand what it meant. She looked at the dark highway ahead. He trusted me, she said. He built his whole plan around trusting you, Adrian said. She thought about the overdue notices at the bottom of her purse, the $12 in tips, the 6 years of invisible shifts and small survivals, and the careful management of a life that had no margin for error. She thought about a man building a plan around her that spanned 8 years beyond his own death. Something large and quiet moved through her chest and settled. He would have liked you, she said. She didn't fully know why she said it. Adrian was quiet for a moment. I would have liked him, he said. Outside, Chicago began to reappear on the horizon, the specific glow of a city that never fully darkened, and Lena Carter watched it coming and understood that she was returning to it different from how she'd left it 24 hours ago. Not just in what she knew, but in what she was willing to carry and who she was willing to carry it beside. That recognition was its own kind of arrival, and what waited on the other side of it in a city where Victor Kane was still moving and Catherine Marsh existed and the capsule was in transit and everything was about to change would require everything she had. She found for the first time in a very long time that she believed she had enough. They got back to the safe house at 2:30 in the morning, and Lena went straight to the kitchen sink and ran cold water over her wrists the way she always did when she needed to think clearly, an old habit from years of stepping outside the diner on hot nights to reset between difficult tables. Margaret was awake. Of course she was. Sit, Margaret said, and put food on the table that she had clearly kept warm against their return, the kind of practical care that didn't announce itself. Lena sat. She ate without tasting it. Across the table, Adrian was already on one of the phones, speaking quietly in the clipped shorthand of someone coordinating moving parts. She caught fragments. The capsule's location confirmed. Danvers monitoring Victor's next movement. A name she didn't recognize repeated twice with a specific emphasis. Tom was at the laptop. She looked at the two of them and felt something she recognized as the particular loneliness of being the civilian in a room of professionals, the person whose expertise was useful in one specific way, and who now had to sit still while other people used it. She did not handle sitting still especially well. Tom, she said. He looked up. Gerald Sims, she said. Victor's people are going to him tomorrow morning. What happens if Sims doesn't answer the door? They'll come back, Tom said. Or they'll find another way to reach him. What if he's not there to reach? She said. Tom looked at her steadily. That's already in motion, he said. We have someone driving to Indianapolis tonight. Sims agreed to stay with a relative for a few days when we explained the timeline. She nodded. She had not known that had been arranged. She looked at Adrian, who had finished his call and was looking at her across the table. You handled that on the drive back, she said. When you were sleeping, he said. I wasn't sleeping. Your eyes were closed, he said. I was thinking. For 45 minutes without moving, he said. She looked at him. I think very thoroughly, she said. Something shifted in his expression. That quality she'd catalogued repeatedly. Now the thing that lived under the authority and the calculation and the careful management of everything. It was closer to the surface tonight. The long day had worn away some of the careful distance he maintained between himself and whatever he actually felt. She turned back to Tom. The capsule, she said. When does it reach Catherine Marsh? That depends on Marsh's schedule and on how we approach the handoff, Tom said. Adrian has a lawyer separate from the organization Clean Record who has a pre-existing relationship with Marsh's office. The plan is to route the capsule through him as a protected disclosure. Timeline, she said. 48 hours if everything holds, Tom said. She absorbed that. 48 hours was a long time in a situation where Victor Kane was actively regrouping and where the story Adrian had told at the Meridian Club was already being tested by whatever intelligence Victor had about the Woodlawn building. What can go wrong in 48 hours, she said. Many things, Adrian said simply. Which is why we're not sleeping, She looked at him. "You should sleep," she said. "You haven't slept in over 30 hours. "Neither have you." "I'm younger," she said. That moved across his face in the way she was beginning to recognize as the closest he got to genuine amusement, a particular compression at the corner of his mouth quickly controlled. 3 hours, Margaret said from the counter in the tone of a person who was not making a suggestion. "Both of you. The world will still be complicated in 3 hours, and you will be more useful in it." Adrian looked at Margaret. 3 hours, he said. He looked at Lena. 3 hours, she agreed. She did not actually sleep. She lay on the bed in the second-floor room and stared at the ceiling and let her mind work through the architecture of the next 48 hours, the way it worked through every problem she'd been handed alone, systematically, finding the load-bearing elements and the weak points and the places where the structure could fail. The weak points were specific. Victor Kane knew they had been in the Woodlawn building. He did not know what they had found there. His natural assumption would be that they had found something because the alternative that they had gone there and found nothing would have been visible in Adrian's behavior at the Meridian Club. Adrian had performed indifference, not relief. Victor would read that as a man who found exactly what he expected to find and considered it managed. The question was what Victor thought they had expected to find. If he believed the darkroom contained only equipment, he would conclude the visit was a dead end. If he believed it might have contained documentation, he would move faster. She was thinking about this at 4 a.m. when her phone, the one Tom had given her as a replacement for her own, buzzed on the nightstand. She looked at it. Unknown number. She looked at it for one more second. She answered. "Lena Carter," the voice said. Male older, the particular smoothness of a man who had spent decades in rooms where the quality of your voice was the first thing people used to assess you. "I've been hoping to speak with you directly." Every nerve in her body identified the voice before her mind caught up with the identification. Victor Kane. She sat up. She did not make a sound. She was aware in the exact same moment of 3 separate things: the phone in her hand, the door to the hallway, and the precise distance between her and Adrian's room. "I can tell you're surprised," Victor said. "I apologize for the hour, but I've found that late-night conversations tend to be more honest than daytime ones. People are tired. They say what they mean." "How did you get this number?" she said. Her voice came out steady. She was grateful for that. "The number isn't important," he said. "What's important is that you and I have a conversation without Adrian Moretti managing the terms of it." "I think I'd rather not," she said. "That's understandable," he said. "You've spent 2 days being told a particular story about me. I'd like 30 seconds to offer an alternative." "I'm not interested in your alternative. I think," he said with the particular warmth of a man who was very good at performing warmth, "that you should be. Because the story you've been told has a central character who is protecting you. And I'd like you to consider the possibility that what Adrian Moretti is protecting is not you." She was quiet. She heard it as a trap, but she also heard it as a thing with structure. A thing that had been carefully built to sound reasonable. "What does that mean?" she said. Not because she believed it, because she needed to understand the shape of what he was deploying. "Your father's documentation," Victor said. "If it exists. If it contains what Adrian believes it contains. Do you know what it's worth to him specifically?" "He told me what it's worth," she said. "Justice for the people who were killed." "He told you that," Victor said. "Yes, that's a very good answer. That's the answer of a man who understands what a woman like you needs to hear." A brief pause. "Ask yourself, why has Adrian Moretti spent 4 years looking for evidence against me? Is it grief for 2 men who died? Or is it the fact that what I built over 40 years of work is something he wants completely for himself, and the cleanest way to take it is to remove me through legitimate channels so that no one can claim it was a power play?" She held the phone against her ear. She thought about what he was saying. She thought about it seriously the way she thought about everything, looking at it directly without flinching. And then she thought about the driver's debt that Adrian had paid without telling anyone. She thought about Gerald Sims saying Thomas Carter was a good man who did what he believed was right, and Adrian saying, "I would have liked him." She thought about a man who had not slept in 30 hours and who had looked at her across a car in the dark and said he built his whole plan around trusting you. "Mr. Kane," she said. "Yes," he said with the warmth of a man who believed he was winning. "You're very good at this," she said. The voice, the pacing, the way you build a case inside a question so the person on the other end feels like they're doing the reasoning themselves, that's a specific skill. A brief silence. "But here's the problem," she said. "You're telling me not to trust the person who warned me you would do exactly this. He told me you would try to reach me. He told me what it would sound like. And here you are, sounding exactly like that." The warmth in his voice cooled by several degrees. "I'm going to put this phone down now," she said. "And in the morning, I'm going to tell Adrian you called. And whatever you thought you were accomplishing tonight, I want you to understand that you accomplished the opposite." She ended the call. She sat in the dark for 3 seconds. Then she got up and went to Adrian's room and knocked. He opened the door in under 5 seconds, which confirmed he hadn't been sleeping either. "Victor just called me," she said. He looked at the phone in her hand. He said one word that was not appropriate for polite company. "Come in," he said. "Tell me everything." She told him everything. Every word, every pause, every calculated warmth in Victor's voice. Adrian listened without interrupting, standing near the window with his arms crossed, and when she finished, he was quiet for a full 30 seconds. "He has the number Tom gave you," he said. "Yes." "Which means someone gave it to him," he said. The implication sat between them. Tom. Or someone connected to Tom. Or someone connected to the chain that had produced the phone. "I don't think it's Tom," she said immediately. "Neither do I," he said. "But I think we need to be careful about every channel we're using until we find the source." He looked at her. "You handled it right," he said. "What you said to him." "I was angry," she said. "Anger made it easier." "What he said about me," Adrian said carefully. "About my reasons for wanting the evidence." She looked at him. "I heard it," she said. "I thought about it. I decided it was wrong." "How?" he said. "Because the thing you want from removing Victor is not his territory," she said. "I've watched you for 2 days. You're not interested in acquisition. You're interested in repair. Those are different things, and they produce different behavior." He was looking at her with that expression again. "Also," she said, "you paid a driver's debt anonymously. Men who are in it for acquisition don't do that." He went very still. "Margaret," he said. "Margaret," she confirmed. "She told me this morning. She wanted me to have data." A beat. "She approves of you," he said with a quality that suggested Margaret's approval was not something he'd ever before thought to mention. "I know," Lena said. "She told me that too." He looked at her. "Are you always this direct?" he said. "When I'm tired and have been awake for 2 days and someone tried to manipulate me on the phone at 4 in the morning," she said. Yes. Something moved through his expression that was, she realized, genuine relief. Not at the situation. At her. At the specific quality of her. "We need to move the timeline up," he said, pulling himself back to the immediate. "If Victor can reach you on a phone, he shouldn't have. He's closer to the edges of our operation than I thought. The 48 hours to Marsh becomes 24. "Can you make that happen?" she said. "I'm going to make it happen," he said. She looked at him in the dim light of the room. This man who had not slept and who was already recalculating everything. And she felt the specific quality of trust that comes not from knowing someone a long time, but from watching them under pressure repeatedly and finding them consistent. Consistent was what she had never had. Consistent was what she had not known she was looking for until it was in the room with her. "Go call Tom," she said. "I'll make coffee." He looked at her for 1 moment longer than necessary. Then he moved. By 6 in the morning, the new timeline was in motion. Adrian's lawyer, a precise woman named Elaine Cho, who arrived at the safe house at 5:45 with the focused energy of someone who considered 5:45 a reasonable hour, had the capsule in a protected evidence bag and a meeting with Catherine Marsh's senior investigator scheduled for 10 o'clock. Elaine Cho looked at Lena once when she arrived, the direct assessment of a very intelligent person making quick judgments, and then looked at Adrian and said, "She comes to the meeting." Adrian looked at Lena. "Why?" he said to Elaine. "Because Marsh's investigator is going to want to understand provenance," Elaine said. "The capsule's chain of custody runs through the dark room, runs through Thomas Carter. The person who can speak to that directly and credibly is sitting right there. It puts her in a room that Victor's people might be watching," Adrian said. "I'll handle the approach," Elaine said. "Marsh's office has a private entrance. Victor doesn't have anyone on her building, or I'd know about it." Lena looked at Adrian. "She's right," Lena said. "I should be there." He looked at her for a moment. "All right," he said. Elaine Cho permitted herself a small expression of satisfaction. "We leave at 9, she said. "Get some sleep." Nobody slept. Catherine Marsh's senior investigator was a man named David Park, who had the particular quality of federal agents who had been doing this specific work for long enough that surprise was something that happened to other people. He was 43, careful, and he looked at the capsule on the table between them with the expression of a man who had spent 3 years building a case on incomplete evidence and was now looking at the piece that changed everything. He did not touch it immediately. He looked at Lena. "You're Thomas Carter's daughter," he said. "Yes," she said. "You found this in the building on Woodlawn, yes?" "Tell me exactly how," he said. "Not the summary. Everything." She told him everything. The dark room, the chemicals in their specific order, the developer bottle, the capsule inside it. The encoded message her father had left in an ordinary sentence 9 years ago. The connection she'd made in a kitchen at 2 in the morning because her father had taught her to understand that developing was where the real work happened. David Park listened with the quality of someone who was doing 2 things simultaneously, hearing her and already running the evidentiary structure in parallel. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Gerald Sims," he said. She looked at Elaine. "We identified Sims as a potential corroborating witness," Adrian said carefully. "We've been looking for Gerald Sims for 8 months, Park said flatly. "He's been on our radar as someone with direct knowledge of the operational period, and we haven't been able to establish contact." "He's available," Adrian said, "under the right conditions." Park looked at him. "Define the right conditions," Park said. "He speaks to Marsh directly," Adrian said. "Not through intermediaries. Full immunity discussion before he says anything substantive." "That's a conversation for Marsh herself," Park said. "Then arrange it," Adrian said, not aggressively, simply in the way of a person who had said the obvious thing and was waiting for the room to catch up. Park picked up his phone. He made a call. He spoke for 90 seconds. He hung up. "Marsh will see you this afternoon," he said. "All of you." Lena looked at Adrian. Adrian looked at her. Something passed between them in that look that neither of them named. But the afternoon did not go the way any of them had planned. At 11:15, Tom called Adrian's phone with the specific urgency Lena had learned to read in his voice as actual alarm rather than controlled concern. "Victor moved," Tom said. "He's not regrouping anymore. He's acting." "What did he do?" Adrian said. "He called a press contact," Tom said. "A journalist he's had in his pocket for years. The story is going out this afternoon. An exclusive about Adrian Moretti, organized crime, and a missing woman named Lena Carter." The room went cold. "Missing," Lena said. "The story frames it as an abduction," Tom said. "Adrian took a civilian by force. The woman is being held against her will. Victor has someone willing to go on record saying they witnessed the original incident at the diner. The tall one with the scar," Lena said immediately. She knew it without question. "He's Victor's witness. He was in the diner. He can describe the whole thing from a perspective that sounds like a rescue if you flip the story. Yes, Tom said. If that story runs before we get to Marsh, Adrian said, everything becomes contaminated. Elaine said, her voice very flat. A federal prosecutor cannot be seen receiving evidence from a man currently being credibly accused of abducting the witness who found it. The word credibly hung in the room. Lena looked at the table. She thought fast. How long until the story runs? She said. The journalist has it now, Tom said. If they publish online, it could be 2 hours, maybe less. Can you stop it? She said. Not through normal channels, Tom said. She looked at Adrian. His jaw was set in the way she had learned meant he was absorbing something he had not fully accounted for and was integrating it without showing the cost. I can stop it, she said. Everyone in the room looked at her. I'm not missing, she said. I left the diner voluntarily. I'm sitting in this room right now, and I am available to confirm both of those things to any journalist, any authority, or any camera that needs to see them. Lena, Adrian started. If I go public before the story runs, she said, there is no story. Victor's narrative requires me to be unavailable. It requires me to be somewhere I can't speak for myself. If I am visibly, verifiably, publicly not abducted, the whole frame collapses. It puts you in front of cameras, Adrian said. It puts your face on every screen in the city. Victor is already trying to put my face on every screen in the city, she said. The difference is the story I'm telling when it happens. The room was completely silent. Elaine Cho looked at Adrian. She's right, Elaine said. Legally and strategically. A voluntary statement from Lena before publication removes the foundation of the entire narrative. It also removes any ability to keep her location private, Adrian said. His voice had a quality in it that was not about strategy. Once she's public, Victor knows exactly where to direct attention. Victor already called my phone at 4 a.m, Lena said. The private location is already compromised. What I have right now is time and the ability to speak before his narrative locks in. Adrian looked at her. She saw something in his face that was more exposed than she had seen before. Something that the urgency of the moment had stripped the careful management away from. He was looking at her with an expression that was simultaneously the expression of a man who knew she was right, and a man who was afraid of what being right would cost her. She held his eyes. Let me do this, she said. He was quiet for 3 seconds. Elaine, he said. I have a media contact, Elaine said immediately. Legitimate journalist not in Victor's network. I can have a camera and a credible interviewer here in 40 minutes. Do it, he said. He looked at Lena. 40 minutes, he said. Use them to decide exactly what you want to say. I already know what I want to say, she said. The journalist was a woman named Sandra Okafor, who worked for a network affiliate, and who arrived with a single camera operator and the brisk competence of someone who understood they were being given something significant and was not going to waste it with unnecessary setup. She looked at Lena. You're comfortable with this, she said, not performatively, actually asking. Yes, Lena said. Then let's go. Lena sat in a chair in the safe house living room, and the camera was on, and Sandra Okafor asked her name and she gave it, and Sandra asked if she was here of her own free will, and she said yes, and then she said everything that mattered in the specific order it mattered. She said she had left the diner on Halsted Street voluntarily 2 nights ago because she was in danger from people she was not yet able to name publicly. She said Adrian Moretti had offered her protection, and she had accepted it. She said she was safe, she was not held against her will, and she was speaking publicly because she had been informed that a false account of her situation was about to be published. She said her father's name. She said she had spent 2 days discovering that her father was a man who had tried to do something important at great personal cost, and that the people trying to silence the account of that work were the same people who had sent 3 men into a diner to collect her. She said, I am Thomas Carter's daughter, and I am not missing, and I am not afraid. Sandra Okafor asked one follow-up question. What do you want people to understand from this? Lena looked at the camera. That the people who count on being invisible to operate, she said, become very uncomfortable when the people they're trying to use refuse to stay invisible. Sandra nodded once. Thank you, she said. The camera went off. Sandra looked at her for a moment. That's going to run in 40 minutes, she said. Before anything Victor Kane's contact publishes, I'm going to make sure of that. Thank you, Lena said. Sandra left. Adrian was standing in the doorway behind where the camera had been. She turned and looked at him. He was looking at her with an expression that was completely unmanaged. Whatever he usually kept carefully arranged in his face was simply not arranged. He was looking at her the way you look at something you did not expect to find and are not sure what to do with now that you have found it. I am not missing, and I am not afraid, he said quietly, repeating her words. I'm a little afraid, she said honestly, but that's not the part that needed saying. He crossed the room toward her. He stopped 2 feet away. Lena, he said. And the way he said her name in that moment, without any prefix, without it attached to a plan, or a strategy, or an instruction, just the name itself told her something she had been carefully not following forward since the car in the dark on the drive back from Indianapolis. She looked up at him. I know, she said. You don't know what I was going to say? He said. No, she said, but I know the category. He looked at her for a long moment, and then Tom appeared in the hallway behind him. Victor Kane just released a counterstatement, Tom said. He's calling Lena's interview coerced. They both turned. He says she's reading from a prepared statement under duress, Tom said. He's calling for a welfare check. He's going to send police to this address, Elaine said, appearing behind Tom. Then we won't be here, Lena said immediately. All 3 of them looked at her. If police arrive at this address for a welfare check and I'm here, she said, the whole situation gets complicated in ways that give Victor time and leverage. If I'm not here, there's nothing to check. Where would you go? Adrian said. She thought. Catherine Marsh, she said. We were going to her office this afternoon anyway. We go now. I walk into a federal prosecutor's office voluntarily on camera if necessary with Elaine and the capsule and everything we have. Victor cannot claim duress if I'm sitting in a federal building. Elaine Cho looked at Lena with the expression of a woman who was genuinely impressed and had not expected to be. That ends it, Elaine said. If she walks in voluntarily with the evidence and requests a meeting, Marsh has to take it. And once Marsh takes it, the narrative Victor is building becomes legally irrelevant. How fast can we move? Adrian said. Car is outside, Tom said. Go, Adrian said. And then he looked at Lena. I can't go with you, he said. Not to Marsh's office, not today. If I walk into a federal prosecutor's office, it changes the nature of the meeting. She understood that immediately. I know, she said. Elaine will be with you, he said. Tom will be with you. I know, she said again. Lena. He said her name again with that unmanaged quality. What you're walking into that building to do is finish what your father started. I want you to know that I understand that. And I want you to know that I'm not going to be anywhere I'm not supposed to be today, but that I will be exactly where you need me to be when it matters. She looked at him. She thought about the specific nature of trust, how it was not a feeling, but a decision, how it had to be made with information, and without the guarantee of outcome, how it was the most vulnerable and most necessary of the practical things a person could do. She had made that decision over 2 days of watching him in the situations that revealed character. I know where you'll be, she said. She picked up her jacket. She followed Elaine and Tom to the door. She did not look back. Not because she was afraid to, because she understood for the first time in a very long time that looking back was something you only did when you weren't sure about what was ahead. She was sure. Catherine Marsh was 47 years old and had the quality of a person who had built their entire professional life on the specific discipline of following evidence wherever it led, regardless of how inconvenient the destination. She stood when Lena was brought into her office, and she looked at Lena with the direct assessment of someone who had already pulled everything available on Thomas Carter the moment her investigator had called. "Sit down," she said. Lena sat. "Tell me about the dark room," Marsh said. And Lena told her. All of it. Her father the message in an ordinary sentence. The chemicals in their specific order. The capsule in the developer bottle. The full scope of what they had found on the screen in the safe house kitchen. She told it cleanly and in sequence because she had her father's ability to organize information under pressure, and she understood now exactly her father's daughter in the ways that mattered. Marsh listened without interrupting. When Lena finished, Marsh looked at the capsule in its evidence bag on the desk between them. "Do you understand what's in here?" Marsh said. "Yes," Lena said. "It will be used in a federal proceeding," Marsh said. "You will likely be called as a witness. Your presence in this process is now unavoidable." "I know," Lena said. "Are you prepared for that?" Lena looked at her. She thought about 2 nights ago when she had been counting tips in a diner and thinking about electricity bills. She thought about her father sitting in a dark room in red light teaching an 8-year-old girl how images were made. She thought about a man in a black coat who had walked through a door in the rain and said, "You're in danger. Stay with me." My father spent 2 years building something that he believed was important enough to cost him everything, she said. "I found it. I brought it here. Yes, I'm prepared." Marsh looked at her for a moment. She picked up the capsule. "Ms. Carter," she said, "what your father built is one of the most complete records of organized criminal enterprise I've encountered in 20 years of this work. The documentation is extraordinary." Lena pressed her hands flat on her knees. "He was extraordinary," she said. "I just didn't know it until now." Marsh nodded once. She set the capsule down and picked up her phone and made a call. She said 3 words. "Bring in Kane." And the thing Thomas Carter had started in a dark room 15 years ago. The thing he had kept safe across 8 years of his own death. The thing his daughter had carried unknowingly through $12 tip nights and overdue notices, and the invisible daily survival of a woman who had learned not to need anyone, began its final motion toward the end he had always intended. Outside the window, Chicago moved in its ordinary, indifferent way through an ordinary afternoon, and inside a federal prosecutor's office on the 14th floor, Lena Carter sat in a chair with her hands flat on her knees and felt for the first time in her memory that the ground beneath her was holding. Not because someone else was holding it, because she had put it there herself. Catherine Marsh did not move slowly. That was the first thing Lena understood about how federal power actually operated when it finally decided to move. There was no gradual escalation, no bureaucratic hesitation, no committee convened to assess whether the evidence warranted the action. Marsh looked at what Thomas Carter had built across 2 years of dangerous, deliberate documentation. She looked at 15 years of architecture exposed in a single capsule, and she made 3 phone calls in 11 minutes that set things in motion that could not be reversed. Lena sat in the chair across from Marsh's desk and listened to those calls with the specific quality of attention she'd developed over years of working tables in a loud diner, the ability to track multiple conversations simultaneously while appearing to focus on only one thing. The first call was to Marsh's supervisor. Short, precise, the kind of call where every word was load-bearing. Evidence of extraordinary scope. Immediate authorization required. Yes, tonight. The second call was to someone in the FBI whose name meant nothing to Lena, but whose response visible in the way Marsh's posture shifted from controlled urgency to something more certain clearly meant everything. The third call was to a judge. When Marsh hung up after the third call, she looked at Lena. "We'll move on Kane tonight," she said. "Arrest, not a summons. No advance warning." Lena absorbed that. "How long until it happens?" she said. "Hours," Marsh said. "Not days." Elaine Cho, sitting beside Lena, made a small sound that was not quite relief, but lived in the same neighborhood. "There are people connected to Kane beyond Kane himself," Elaine said carefully. The documentation names Judge Carver, Senator Millen's chief of staff individuals in several financial institutions. I've read the index, Marsh said. Each name will be handled in sequence appropriately and with independent corroboration where the documentation permits. Kane is the center. We take the center first. She looked at Lena directly. You'll need to be available over the next 72 hours, she said. Questions will come to you about the chain of custody, the darkroom, your father's methodology. I need you accessible, and I need you safe. I understand, Lena said. Do you have somewhere secure to be tonight? Marsh said. Yes, Lena said. She meant it. Tom drove her back to the safe house at 4 in the afternoon. The city moved past the windows with its ordinary afternoon quality, the specific Chicago light of October that was not quite warm, but not yet winter, the kind of light that made buildings look precise and particular and real. She had grown up inside this light. She had moved through it invisibly for years, counting the distance between herself and the things she needed, managing the math of a small life carefully, so nothing collapsed. She was not invisible now. Sandra Okafor's interview had run at 1:15. By 2 o'clock, it had been picked up by 4 additional outlets. By 3:30, Victor's counter-narrative had collapsed publicly under the simple, irrefutable fact of Lena sitting in a chair, speaking clearly about her own situation in her own words, with nothing managed about her expression or her voice. Tom showed her the coverage from the front seat. She watched herself on his phone screen for approximately 45 seconds and then handed it back. I look tired, she said. You've been awake for nearly 40 hours, Tom said. I look like what I am, she said, which was not a complaint. It was in its way the point. She had not looked polished or prepared or positioned. She had looked like a woman telling the truth because she was one. Sims is cooperating, Tom said. He spoke to Marsh's investigator this afternoon. Full statement. Good, she said. Danvers reached out to Adrian an hour ago, Tom said. Victor's inner circle is fracturing. 3 people who were at the Meridian Club meeting 2 nights ago have gone silent. In that world, silence is a specific kind of answer. She nodded. How is Adrian? She said. Tom was quiet for a moment. Waiting, he said. She understood what that meant. She understood it with the specificity of the last 2 days, the particular quality of what it looked like when a man who controlled everything found himself in a situation where the most important thing happening was outside his control, and all he could do was hold the perimeter. She looked out the window at the city. She thought about what Marsh had set in motion. She thought about Victor Kane. She thought about her father, who had made his peace with whatever was going to happen, and what was left was just the work. The work was almost done. Adrian was in the kitchen when she came through the door. Not at the table, not at a phone, not managing one of the parallel tracks he was always running. He was standing near the counter with a cup of coffee he clearly hadn't been drinking. And when she came through the door, he looked at her in a way that told her he had been standing there for a while. Margaret was nowhere visible. Tom came in behind Lena, said something about making calls, and disappeared. She and Adrian were alone in the kitchen. She set her jacket on the chair. She looked at him. Marsh moves tonight, she said. He nodded. He already knew. She could see that. Sims cooperated, she said. He nodded again. Victor's circle is fracturing, she said. I know, he said. She looked at him. Then why do you look like that? She said. Like what? He said. Like something went wrong, she said. He set the cup down. Nothing went wrong, he said. You walked into a federal prosecutor's office alone and handed her what 4 years of work was building toward. You gave a statement on camera that dismantled Victor's narrative before it had an hour to breathe. You did all of it without me in the room. She waited. I'm not used to that, he said. The admission was simple and direct, and she understood it cost him something, because admission of any kind cost men like him something specific. Not used to what? She said. Someone handling things without you. Not used to caring whether someone can, he said. The kitchen was very quiet. She looked at him across the distance between the door and the counter, which was not very much distance, and she felt the accumulated weight of 2 days settle into a different configuration. Not heavier, just differently arranged. Like a thing that had been held at arm's length finally allowed to take its actual shape. "Adrian?" she said. He looked at her. "I'm going to say something," she said. "And I want you to let me finish before you respond." "All right," he said. 3 days ago I was counting tips in a diner and thinking about electricity bills," she said. "I had organized my life around the principle of not needing anyone because needing people and not having them is more expensive than not needing them in the first place. I had been doing that for 19 years, and I was very good at it." He was completely still. "And then you walked through a door," she said, "and you told me I was in danger and asked me to stay with you and gave me a choice. And I have been watching you every hour since then. The way I watch everything, I'm not sure about looking for the place where the structure is weak, looking for what breaks under pressure." She paused. "I haven't found it," she said. He looked at her. "That doesn't mean it isn't there," he said carefully. "I know that," she said. "I'm not telling you I've concluded you're without fault or without complication. I'm telling you that the specific thing I was looking for, the place where what you show is different from what you are, I haven't found it, and I've been looking very hard." He was quiet for a moment. "What were you looking for specifically?" he said. "The moment where I stop mattering to you," she said. "The moment where the usefulness ends and the person becomes inconvenient. I've been waiting for that moment since the diner." "And," he said, "you can't fake the expression you had when I walked back in this door," she said. "I've been reading people across tables for 6 years. I know what relief looks like when someone stops managing it." He looked at her. And then he crossed the kitchen. He stopped close enough that she had to look up slightly. "Lena," he said, and her name in his voice had the quality it had been accumulating over 2 days of being said, in moments that mattered in the diner and the car and the stairwell and the study, each time adding something, each time containing more than the last. "I know," she said. "You keep saying that," he said. "You keep telling me you know what I was going to say." "Because I do," she said. "But you should say it anyway." He looked at her for a moment. "I have been careful about everything in my life," he said. "Careful about who gets close. Careful about what I show. Careful about what I let matter, because the things that matter become the things that can be used against you, and I have spent 20 years in a world where everything can be used against you." "Yes," she said. "You broke that system in 48 hours, he said. "Without trying, without strategy. Just by being exactly what you are in every room you walked into." She held his eyes. "I'm a waitress from Halsted Street who was counting tips 3 days ago," she said. "You are the most capable person I've been in a room with in 20 years, he said. "And yes, you were also counting tips 3 days ago. Both of those things are true simultaneously." She felt something move through her that was not the careful, managed redistribution she was practiced at. It was something that went all the way through without being redirected. "I'm not easy," she said. "I ask questions. I push back. I don't accept management." "I know," he said, and for the first time in 2 days, there was something fully unguarded in his voice. "That's specifically what I'm telling you." She looked at him. She had 19 years of carefully maintained self-sufficiency, and she had 2 days of evidence, and she had the particular clarity that came from exhaustion and crisis, and the accumulated proof of watching someone be consistent under pressure. She made the decision. She reached up and put her hand against the side of his face. He went very still. "I'm still going to push back," she said. "I'm counting on it," he said. The call came at 9:47 that evening. Tom knocked on the kitchen doorway where Lena and Adrian were sitting across from each other with food Margaret had produced, and the specific quality of 2 people who had crossed some internal threshold and were still figuring out what territory they'd arrived in. Victor Kane was arrested 40 minutes ago, Tom said. Federal agents, his home. He was taken without incident. The kitchen was completely silent for 1 full second. Then Lena set down her fork. She thought about her father. She thought about the dark room and the red light and the chemicals in their specific order. She thought about 2 years of work inside a dangerous world carried alone, recorded in meticulous detail, sealed in a waterproof capsule in a developer bottle, and left for 15 years in a room that smelled like the work of making images appear in darkness. She thought about what her father had said to Gerald Sims 8 months before he died. Thomas Carter was a good man who did what he believed was right. She pressed her hands flat on the table. Judge Carver, she said. Federal agents are at his residence, Tom said. 2 others named in the documentation are already in custody. It's moving. She nodded. Adrian was watching her. Are you all right? He said. She thought about the question seriously. Yes, she said. I'm all right. She paused. I thought I would feel something larger, some version of relief or triumph. What do you feel? He said. She thought about it. Finished, she said. The way you feel when something that has been suspended for a very long time is finally set down. He nodded slowly. Your father set it down 15 years ago, he said. It's been in motion since then. You just carried the last part of it. She looked at him. We did, she said. He held her eyes. Yes, he said. We did. She called Rosa at 10 o'clock. Rosa answered on the first ring, which meant she had been awake and waiting, which meant she had seen the news coverage, which meant Lena was going to spend the first 2 minutes of this call managing Rosa's feelings about the last 3 days before she could actually speak. She was right about that. Lena Marie Carter, Rosa said. And the full name was a specific kind of emphasis that Rosa only deployed when she had been genuinely frightened. I have been watching the news for 6 hours. 6 hours. Do you know what 6 hours of watching the news does to a person my age? Rosa, I saw your interview, Rosa said. I saw you sitting in that chair looking like you hadn't slept in 3 days, which you clearly hadn't, saying you weren't afraid. You are a terrible liar. I want you to know that. I was a little afraid, Lena said. A little, Rosa said. A moderate amount, Lena said. Rosa made a sound that was partly relief and partly 22 years of knowing Lena Carter across the specific distances that diners created between people. Are you safe? Rosa said. The question underneath all the others. Yes, Lena said. Genuinely. The man, Rosa said. Moretti, is he? He's here, Lena said. A pause. Here, Rosa said. Yes. In the same room here, Oreo, Rosa. I'm just establishing facts, Rosa said. I'm a very factual person. He's in the kitchen, Lena said. I'm in the hallway. And is he, Rosa said carefully, someone I need to form opinions about? Lena looked down the hallway toward the kitchen, where she could see Adrian's profile as he spoke quietly to Tom, the particular way he held himself that she had catalogued over 2 days without meaning to. Yes, she said. Rosa was quiet for a moment. He'd better be worth it, she said finally. That's all I have to say. He is, Lena said. Good, Rosa said. Now come see me when this is over. I kept your last paycheck. She laughed. The real version this time, the one that went all the way through. I'll come tomorrow, she said. I'll make tamales, Rosa said. The good ones. She did not sleep that night, not because she couldn't. The exhaustion was complete and physical, and would have made sleep easy if she'd allowed it. She didn't sleep because she sat in the kitchen with Adrian long after Tom and Margaret had gone to bed. And they talked in the way that people talk when the pressure has lifted, and what's left is the actual person without the urgency giving them structure. He told her about growing up in Chicago, about a father who had died when he was 14, about the specific way that loss had shaped everything afterward, the way certain voids get filled by whatever is available, and what was available to him at 14 in his neighborhood was not always what should have been available. She told him about her mother, the long illness, the particular quality of grief that came from watching someone leave slowly, the way you kept adjusting to smaller and smaller versions of the person until the version of them you were grieving at the end was barely recognizable as the person you'd started with. He told her that he had spent 20 years building something that Victor had spent 20 years partially dismantling from the inside, and that what he wanted now was not to rebuild what had existed, but to build something different. Something that the last 3 years of understanding what Victor had done had clarified the shape of. "What does that look like?" she said. He thought about it. "Smaller," he said. "More deliberate. Less about maintaining power for its own sake." He paused. "I've spent 20 years believing that control was the same thing as safety. That if you managed everything tightly enough, nothing unexpected could reach you. And then something unexpected reached you," she said. "You reached me," he said, "which I did not manage and did not control, and which turned out to be the most important thing that happened in 4 years of trying to solve this." She looked at him. "I walked through a door," she said. "You walked through a door," he confirmed, "and asked me for real answers instead of accepting the version I'd prepared, and pushed back on every decision I tried to make for you, and figured out in a kitchen at 2 in the morning what 4 years of professional searching hadn't found." "My father found it," she said. "I just remembered where he put it." "That's not a small thing," he said. She thought about her father. She had been doing that all night, in the spaces between sentences, the way you return to something you're still making sense of. She had spent 8 years grieving a man she had reduced to his absence. The last 3 days had given her something more complex and more real, a man who had been afraid and determined, and who had loved her in the specific way available to him, which was not the way she would have chosen, but was. She was coming to understand a way that was entirely his own and entirely meant for her. "I have to go to the building on Woodlawn," she said. Adrian looked at her. "Not for evidence," she said. "That's done. I need to go back for myself. To stand in that room." She paused. "Is that strange?" "No," he said immediately. "When do you want to go?" "Tomorrow," she said. "Morning." "I'll come with you," he said. She looked at him. "You don't have to," she said. "I know that," he said. "I want to." She nodded. She thought about what it felt like specifically to have someone offer to be somewhere with you and to believe they meant it. She had not felt that in a very long time. She felt it now. The next 2 weeks moved with the particular quality of aftermath, the specific combination of activity and processing that followed something large. Victor Kane was formally charged on 14 counts. The charges were not going away. Elaine Cho described the documentation as prosecutorially airtight, in a tone that suggested she did not use that phrase lightly. Judge Carver resigned. The chief of staff was suspended pending investigation. The names in her father's files began moving through the legal system with the slow, certain momentum of something that had been prepared for exactly this purpose. Lena gave 3 formal statements to Marsh's office. She answered every question directly and in detail. She was, as she had told Marsh, she would be prepared. Gerald Sims testified in a preliminary proceeding and afterward called Lena on the phone and said only, "Your father would be glad." She thanked him and held the phone for a moment after he hung up and did the breathing thing and went back to what she was doing. She went to see Rosa on the second day. She ate tamales at the counter of the diner that had the yellow tape removed and the back storage organized, and Rosa's opinion delivered across the table on every aspect of the situation, including, and especially, Adrian Moretti, whom Rosa declared acceptable after Lena described the expression on his face when she'd walked back into the safe house from Marsh's office. "That's the expression," Rosa said. "What expression?" Lena said. "The one you can't fake," Rosa said. "Men can fake a lot of things. They can't fake relief." "I know," Lena said. "Good," Rosa said. "You going back to the diner?" Lena looked at the counter, at the coffee cups stacked in the order she'd stacked them for 6 years, at the table in the corner where she'd counted tips and thought about electricity bills. "I don't think so," she said. Rosa looked at her. No, Rosa said slowly. I don't think so either. She reached across the counter and squeezed Lena's hand, once the particular gesture of a woman who had watched someone grow up across the specific distance of a diner counter and understood that the growing was done. She went to the building on Woodlawn on the third morning with Adrian beside her in the early light, and they rode the old slow elevator to the fourth floor in silence. The studio was as they had left it. Door unlocked the equipment on the shelf, the black curtain across the far wall. She pushed through it. The dark room. She stood in it without turning on the safe light. She stood in the full dark and breathed the particular chemical smell of developer and stop bath and fixer, and she let the room be what it was. The last place her father had hidden something important. The place he had arranged to be here when she needed it. She heard Adrian come through the curtain behind her. He stood beside her in the dark without speaking. He taught me in here, she said. 8 years old. He said the developing was where the real work happened, that anyone could take a picture, but the image only became real in the dark. Adrian was quiet. I thought it was just something he said about photography, she said, but he was telling me something about himself, about what he was doing in here. Yes, Adrian said. The real work happens in the dark, she said, where no one can see it, where you do it alone. She was quiet for a moment. I don't want to do things alone anymore, she said. It came out simpler than she expected. Not a declaration, not an emotional statement. Just a fact delivered with the directness she brought to everything, the particular precision of a woman who had learned to say what she meant, because saying around things cost too much. In the dark beside her, she felt Adrian shift. His hand found hers, not reaching for her wrist the way he had in the diner, not the urgent grip of emergency. Just his hand, quiet and deliberate, finding her hand in the dark. She held it. I should tell you something, he said. Tell me, she said. I'm not a simple situation, he said. What I'm in the middle of restructuring, what comes next, the people I'm responsible for, the decisions that have to be made about what the organization becomes without Victor's corruption in it. That's not going to be clean or fast. I know that, she said. What I'm telling you is real, he said, and what I'm telling you is complicated. Both of those are true. Adrian, she said. Yes, he said. I've been managing complicated my whole life, she said. Complicated is not what frightens me. What frightens you? He said. She thought about it. Invisible, she said. Being invisible to someone I've let see me. His hand tightened around hers. Not possible, he said. Functionally impossible. You are the least invisible person I have ever been in a room with. She felt the smile happen before she decided to let it. You should turn the light on, he said. The safe light. If you want to. She reached for the switch. The red light came on. The dark room filled with the garnet glow of her earliest memory of this place. Her father's hands moving with patience and purpose in the dim red, teaching her that this was where images became real. This was where the work that couldn't be seen in full light finally became visible. She looked at the room. She looked at Adrian in the red light, which made him look different from every other context she had seen him in. Not softer exactly, but closer to the surface, the careful management stripped back to something more essential. He was looking at her. We should go, she said. Marsh has questions this morning. We should go, he agreed. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then she reached out and turned the safe light off. She took his hand in the dark. She walked them both back through the black curtain into the ordinary light of the studio. 3 months later, Victor Kane stood in a federal courtroom and listened to 14 counts read aloud in the flat, precise language of indictment. Lena sat in the gallery and watched his face. He did not look at her. He looked forward with the controlled expression of a man who had spent 40 years managing what he showed the room, and was managing it still even now, even here. She thought about what he had said to her on the phone at 4 a.m. The warmth in his voice, the careful construction of an alternative story. the specific skill of a man who had shaped narratives for so long that he had perhaps stopped distinguishing between narrative and truth. She thought about her father sitting in that dark room for 2 years, recording exactly what Victor was. Victor Kane entered a plea of not guilty. It did not matter. She had read enough of her father's documentation to understand that not guilty was a posture, not a destination. She stood up. She walked out of the courtroom into the hallway where Adrian was waiting because he could not be in the room because his presence in a federal proceeding connected to this case was complicated. But he could be in the hallway. He was in the hallway. She walked to where he was standing, and she stopped in front of him. "Done," she said. He looked at her. "Not done," he said. "The trial. The outcome is done," she said. "The trial is a process. The outcome is done." He accepted this. "How do you feel?" he said. She thought about it with the seriousness she brought to everything. She thought about a diner on Halsted Street, and $12 in tips, and a landlord's notice folded at the bottom of a purse. She thought about 3 men and a rainy night, and a man in a black coat, who walked through a door like someone who had already decided. She thought about a dark room and a capsule in a developer bottle, and her father's hands moving in red light, patient and deliberate, teaching her that images only became real in the absence of light, that the work you couldn't see was sometimes the most important work of all. She thought about Gerard Sims saying your father would be glad. She thought about Rosa and tamales, and the counter she had sat at for 6 years, and the table where she had practiced being invisible until someone finally saw her. She looked at Adrian. "Like myself," she said. "I feel like myself." He looked at her with the expression that had no managed quality in it, the one she had first seen in a kitchen when she'd come back from Marsh's office, and that she had seen every day since, the one that was simply him, unguarded, certain of what it was looking at. "Good," he said. She reached for his hand. He took it. And Lena Carter, who had spent 19 years perfecting the art of invisibility, who had counted tips in a diner and kept the lights on alone and carried her father's encoded message through years of small survival, without knowing she was carrying anything at all, walked through a federal courthouse hallway in the city she had lived in her whole life, beside the man who had walked through a door to find her visible to anyone who looked unhidden, undiminished, and completely, permanently her own. Some people spend a lifetime waiting to be saved. Lena Carter discovered that the woman everyone had overlooked had been saving herself all along.